Chapter 245, Fleeing from the City Center, 4, but. That fox dog's eyes were fixed on her and dashing towards her, this posture, clearly, it recognized her and was rushing straight at her. Su Luo's heart abruptly jumped. Although she didn't know the reason, only that the fox dog had identified her, and that was a fact. If it was only Lu Qingfeng alone, then she could still risk a direct fight. However now, Lu Qingfeng had obviously come prepared. At his side, he brought a countless number of experts. She, herself, was unaccompanied. How could she contend and win against him? What's more, in this kind of situation, even sneak attacks or feints were useless. At such a critical juncture, there was no benefit to thinking too much. The only way out was to run. Run past the danger this time first, then discuss things after. Now Su Luo couldn't even describe how wronged and stifled her heart felt. No matter how she analyzed it, she couldn't figure out why even after she had changed her clothes and altered her appearance, Lu Qingfeng was still able to track her down. Thinking along this line, the 2 times she was tailed before should also have been the work of Lu Qingfeng. Su Luo surreptitiously clenched her fists tightly. This person truly wouldn't just disappear, his influence still lingered. Wait until there was an opportunity, then she must get rid of him, otherwise he would cause trouble to no end. Su Luo ran as if she was flying, her body moved fast like lightning. Yet, behind her, Lu Qingfeng and his group of experts pursued relentlessly, unwilling to let her go. The chase became closer and closer. Looking on as it happened, the distance between both sides was pulled closer, drawing nearer. The originally bustling and lively East Street's main road, because of this dramatic pursuit, was now thrown into disorder, with people sent flying and hopping about. It was a complete mess. Everyone was afraid of being dragged in, and tried to keep away or flee. Inwardly, Su Luo's heart was anxious. Not good. If she didn't make some changes, sooner or later they would catch up to her. If Lu Qingfeng merely wanted the cyan-colored crystal stone, then that's okay. However, he had mustered such a large force, this clearly meant that he fancied her as a cash cow. If she was captured by him, then very likely, she wouldn't have any good days to live in the future. Cold dread flashed across Su Luo's eyes. All of a sudden, she saw not far from her, a horse carriage was dashing over here. Dragon-scaled horse. Immediately, Su Luo's heart rejoiced. What did the dragon-scaled horse represent? Su Luo understood this more than any other person. At this time, should she loudly appeal to Nangong Luyun for help? No way, that would lower her self-worth too much. Su Luo's eyes flashed, she was set on her decision. Before she had spared no effort and tried everything, she absolutely must not request his help. Owing debt to others was tolerable. If she was to owe Nangong Luyun a personal favor, then when the time came, she would have to pay with her own flesh. What would she do then? While Su Luo's heart was fluctuating, she had already made a decision. Under the cover of a wall, she waited until the dragon-scaled horse rushed past. Then, she quietly hooked onto the carriage's wall. She turned around and secretly slipped underneath the carriage. Both of her hands were extended and stuck to the red sandalwood boards on the bottom of the carriage. Her body was parallel to the bottom of the carriage. And Lu Qingfeng, who was pursuing closely behind her, unwilling to let her go, didn't expect that in a blink of an eye, not a trace of Su Luo could be seen. Immediately, his expression became exceptionally ugly. A servant with good eyesight promptly went to stand next to him, lowering his voice. In Lu Qingfeng's ears, he said, "Second young master, this servant saw that youngster hide in the horse carriage just now. Then why haven't you stopped that horse carriage without delay? Want to die?" Lu Qingfeng was angered so much that he directly hit him with his whip. But that is, before the servant's words were completed, he was slapped back by Lu Qingfeng. "Regardless of whose horse carriage it is, you must keep it here for this lord. Did you hear me loud and clear? No matter whose horse carriage. The last sentence, Lu Qingfeng had said while grinding his teeth and emphasizing every word. That cyan-colored crystal stone, with regards to the Lu residence, was really too important. Just now, Elder Lu had passed on a message stating that he must get a hold of that piece of cyan-colored crystal stone. He should not spare any means to get it. Therefore, with the support of Elder Lu, Lu Qingfeng's confidence now was naturally quite excessive. Chapter 246, Fleeing from the City Center, 5, That servant who was slapped by Lu Qingfeng now really wouldn't dare to disobey. He could only go and flag down the dragon-scaled horse. Stop! Quickly stop this horse carriage. The Lu residence's servant, with both hands placed at his waist and an unafraid-to-die attitude, stood directly in the middle of the street to try to stop the dragon-scaled horse. But, how could the dragon-scaled horse be that easy to stop? Seeing a person who didn't know what's good for him blocking the road ahead, the bold and powerful dragon-scaled horse raised its pair of front hooves and unhesitantly kicked at that person. Ouch! Immediately, the body of that Lu resident servant was kicked, flying high into the sky and making an arc in midair. Finally, with a thump sound, he fell to the ground. When he landed on the ground, his body had already broken into pieces that were beyond recognition. Gasp! Just in this split second, the originally bustling and noisy Broad Street became silent. Without exception, everyone inhaled a mouthful of cold air. They stared at the sparking scales covering the entire body of the dragon-scaled horse that was shining under the sunlight with stupefied expressions. Lu Qingfeng was also dumbfounded by this fast-changing scene that arose abruptly, but in the next instant, he very quickly returned to his senses. He took a deep breath and started to curse and spew out abuse. However, he only saw the dragon-scaled horse carriage driver's unsympathetic face. He coldly swept Lu Qingfeng a glance, daring to block the dragon-scaled horse. He deserves to die. Underneath the carriage, Su Luo immediately rolled her eyes. Ling Feng, in front of Nangong Luyun, was as obedient as a kitten. She didn't expect that in front of other people, he had such an awe-inspiring, authoritative manner. Dragon-scaled horse. Lu Qingfeng's heart was given a huge shock. Just now, he finally recognized that the horse standing proudly in front of him was none other than His Highness Prince Jin's dragon-scaled horse. Surveying this entire world, this unique and unparalleled dragon-scaled horse was a symbol of His Highness Prince Jin's noble identity. Lu Qingfeng's breath was suddenly stuck in his throat, it couldn't go up or come down. He could only choke on it until he was flushed red in the face. Just a moment ago, he really had, to actually let someone obstruct His Highness Prince Jin's dragon-scaled horse. Very quickly, Lu Qingfeng returned to his senses. His face had a fawning expression as he moved up to the carriage, brimming with enthusiasm. He had a flattering smile on his face, didn't expect that His Highness Prince Jin is here. Yes, this humble servant was too impulsive. Hope Your Highness Prince Jin won't take offense, please by all means, do not take offense. At this moment, Lu Qingfeng's posture was lowered subserviently. Inside the carriage was quiet, not a trace of sound could be heard. However, there was a kind of oppressive pressure that people couldn't ignore coming from within. He hoped it would be so. Lu Qingfeng's heart was trembling in fear. He was scraping and bowing, with cold sweat constantly coming out of his forehead. His body was shuddering non-stop. After a seemingly long time, only then did a muffled, demonically charming voice come from within the carriage. What are you people busy doing? This sound was mild and gentle like nature, it was unhurried, demonically charming and deep. Everyone without exception was speculating, with such a demonically charming and languid sound, what kind of outrageous face would go with this voice. It was a pity that His Highness Prince Jin had always stayed in and gone out without much fanfare. Thus, very few people ever saw his real appearance. At this moment, everyone present at the scene were all holding their breath, watching with rapt attention. They were afraid that if they spit out a mouthful of impure air, they would profane the one and only incomparable person in this world, His Highness Prince Jin. The people around couldn't help but to voluntarily bend at the waist and kneel down. In front of His Highness Prince Jean, who dared to be bold enough to have their head high and chest out. Prince Jean would look at the world disdainfully from the corner of his eyes, like a lord looking over the lands he reigned over. Even when he was merely sitting within a horse carriage, that formidable, domineering, kingly aura was also impossible for people to ignore. Lu Qingfeng did his best to restrain the panic in his heart, lowered his voice and said, "Reporting back to Your Highness Prince Jean, a thief entered our Lu manor. We lost an extremely precious treasure. This humble servant, under the order of the family's lord and master, is tracking down to arrest the thief. I never expected that this would trouble His Highness Prince Jean." Thieves. Inside the carriage, the corner of His Highness Prince Jin's mouth hooked into a thoughtful smile, his entire person looked very indolent. Chapter 247, Fleeing from the City Center, 6, Yes. Lu Qingfeng, 1, added more exaggerated details as he spoke. This thief stole away the treasured cyan-colored crystal stone from our Lu manor, so this one is duty-bound to arrest them. Also, I hope Your Highness Prince Jean will help out by allowing us to continue. Such a great Lu manor could allow a single burglar to steal away the manor's treasure, TSK. Lu manor's strength has actually weakened to such a degree. This single, offhand sentence from His Highness Prince Jin's was like a slap that struck heavily on Lu Qingfeng's body. Lu Qingfeng's face reddened and he stammered speechlessly. The present him was extremely embarrassed. "Return." His Highness Prince Jean commanded casually. The him right now was not only arrogantly aloof, but also overbearing. The dragon-scaled horse neighed, both of its hooves surged forward as it dashed off. Yet right at this moment, that little fox dog was recklessly jumping around on top of the carriage, as if something in there was attracting it. "Young master, we searched all of the surrounding area and found no trace of that person." At this time, a servant from Lu Manor returned to Lu Qingfeng's side and reported in a whisper. Lu Qingfeng watched the constantly pouncing fox dog and his eyes flashed with a complicated light. It was not difficult to guess, that if the person could not be found in the surroundings, it was because the person was in His Highness Prince Jin's carriage. But it was His Highness Prince Jean. Due to the instinctive reverence for Prince Jean, Lu Qingfeng's heart soured. But then, he suddenly recalled that his family's great-grandpa's breakthrough into the 7th rank was already in sight. At that time, he wouldn't necessarily be worse than Prince Jean in strength. By then, they would not need to treat His Highness Prince Jean with such reverence, fear and trepidation. Moreover, he must obtain this cyan-colored crystal stone. Lu Qingfeng's revolving thoughts had already reached a decision. He strode forward a step, barring the dragon-scaled horse's way and loudly proclaimed, "Your Highness Prince Jean, that thief might have hidden on your carriage. In consideration for your safety, you should still disembark for us to examine your carriage thoroughly, lest the thief cause you harm." Lu Qingfeng brought a bunch of martial artists who were from his side. The group of people stood fixed in place ahead, encircling the dragon-scaled horse in the middle. Even though his tone was polite, he assumed a forceful attitude, coercing His Highness Prince Jean to get out of his carriage. Within the carriage, His Highness Prince Jin's dark red thin lips raised faintly, carrying an air of unbridled arrogance. He gave a deep and demonically charming chuckle. "Lu family's boy, are you threatening this king?" Lu Qingfeng's heart was unsettled but he carried on with the same expression, laughing along with him. "I don't dare, wouldn't dare." This one only wanted to invite His Highness Prince Jean out of his carriage to rest a little. "This will give this one a chance to offer your highness a cup of tea, how about it?" His Highness Prince Jean did not speak. It seemed very quiet inside the carriage. After a long while, a mild, humph sound came from within the carriage. Only a light humph intimidated everyone at the scene. No one dared to make a sound and everyone had their heads lowered in fear and trepidation, including Lu Qingfeng. "You still insist?" His Highness Prince Jin's voice was natural, indolent yet bearing a chill, demonically refined and unfathomably enigmatic. Yes, will your Highness Prince Jin please get out of the carriage? Lu Qingfeng clenched his fists and forced his own legs not to tremble. His Highness Prince Jin seemed to find this situation very laughable. He raised his voice and uttered a laugh, drink tea. Chuckle. Ling Feng, offer them some of Prince Jin Royal Manor's blood tea to drink, see if it suits their taste. Yes. Ling Feng's reply was crisp and immediate. Before his words even reached them, his long sword was already out of its scabbard. Su Luo, who was hiding underneath the carriage, did not know what maneuver Ling Feng attacked with. However, she could still hear the unending sounds of the long sword slicing through the air, constantly spewing out a blood mist. The broken limbs were like debris flying in all directions, along with mournful, shrill screams crying out non-stop. In fact, all of this actually took place within a split second. 1. Noticed by Nivrim, Lu Qingfeng's given name in Chinese sounds the same as Lu becoming insane, which is what we see in this chapter. Who in their right mind stops that guy's car, carriage. Chapter 248, Fleeing from the City Center, 7, however, time seemed pass very slowly. By the time Su Luo's consciousness returned, the fight had already ended. Lu Qingfeng's head, face and body were all covered in blood. His eyes were lifeless, his hair was in a mess and his clothing was ragged. The him right now looked extremely pathetic, simply unbearable for people to look at. He was the only one left standing from Lu Manor, and also the only one that was not injured. Yet, the unharmed him now seemed to be in a more horrible state than those that were injured. He could be seen standing there in a daze, stupidly staring at the carriage. Both of his eyes were opened wide like circles, as if his whole person had become an idiot. No matter what, he was unable to regain consciousness. In an instant, all the experts he brought along were disposed of. Until the very end, he still didn't know how the opponent attacked. How could it be like this? The most terrifyingly thing was that the one who took action this time was merely His Highness Prince Jin's personal bodyguard. It was said that His Highness Prince Jin's strength was even more formidable, more terrifying, even more profoundly mysterious. As legends had it, His Highness Prince Jin's most terrifying trait was not his martial arts, but rather, his temper. Legends had it, His Highness Prince Jin was temperamental and capricious, cruel and tyrannical. One moment smiling as if it was clear skies and light breezes, then the next second, his long sword was already unsheathed. Legends told that, there were only times when His Highness Prince Jin was too lazy to take action. There was no one he wouldn't dare to kill. Legends told that, the martial world had countless legends regarding His Highness Prince Jin. He obviously knew it, yet he still deliberately violated them. He really was idiotic and thoroughly foolish. At this very moment, Lu Qingfeng regretted everything until his intestines turned green. Ling Feng slowly and methodically wiped clean the long sword in his hand. He glanced indifferently at Lu Qingfeng and said to His Highness Prince Jin within the carriage, "Your Highness, there is still one left alive." His Highness Prince Jin languidly inclined on the jade seat, fiddling with the white jade thumb ring in his hand and leisurely spoke, "Leave it, he still has to return to Lu Manor to deliver the news." As if nobody else was around them, the master and servant's conversation almost made Lu Qingfeng roar in rage. He was not just any stray cat or dog, he was Lu Manor's second young master. The second young master born of the first wife. The second young master who at this point in time was already a martial artist at the third rank. Could it be that in His Highness Prince Jin's eyes, he was no different from a commoner? In his eyes, was he so intolerable? Lu Qingfeng restrained his anger until his face grew red. His gaze was fixated on the carriage. However, Ling Feng and the dragon-scaled horse did not even bother to glance at him, and they directly left. Even more so His Highness Prince Jin within the carriage, who had never revealed himself since the beginning. The streets were covered in a bloody mist, with a deathly silence all around. The surrounding people had all tried avoiding it by staying far away. Only Lu Qingfeng's dazed figure stood by his lonesome self. Lu Qingfeng recalled piece by piece of what had happened here. He still could not understand why. He had only wanted to invite His Highness Prince Jin to get off the carriage. Why did he decide to kill them all so mercilessly? Why? Did all these high-level experts from the Lu family die for nothing? And there was still that cyan-colored crystal stone. It definitely must not end up in His Highness Prince Jin's hands. Wasn't His Highness Prince Jin a 6th rank martial artist? Their family's ancestor was also 6th rank and might not necessarily lose to him. Thinking of this, Lu Qingfeng gathered his legs and ran towards Lu Manor. The dragon-scaled horse leisurely trotted on the road to Prince Jin's royal manor. Underneath the carriage, Su Luo finally released a relieved sigh. That annoying Lu Qingfeng was finally driven away. She finally escaped this crisis. Hiding under the carriage was never a long-term solution from the start. In addition, Nangong Luyun, if it was possible not to meet this person, all along, Su Luo did not want to see him. Su Luo had originally planned to soundlessly land on the ground, then wait for the dragon-scaled horse to leave before getting up to return to Su Manor. Though her idea seemed well developed, however in reality, it was full of holes. Chapter 249, Fleeing from the City Center, 8, Presently, Su Luo was extremely dismayed to discover that her palms which were tightly gripping the carriage shaft were stuck. It was as if the bottom of this carriage had superglue, tightly sticking to her palms. No matter how much strength she used, her palms could not move. At this moment, Su Luo's heart was somewhat alarmed and fearful. What just happened? Just now when Ling Feng and Lu Manor's men were fighting, she obviously could still move her hands. Why couldn't she move it now? Moreover, it was not just both of her hands, even her legs were as if they had grown from the bottom of the carriage, unable to move an inch, much less run away. Su Luo continued to struggle non-stop, twisting around in an attempt to break free, but all her efforts were futile. At this point, she really was starting to get anxious. In contrast to this, within the carriage, His Highness Prince Jin was lounging on the jade seat. His cascading black hair was as smooth as silk, loosely tied with a ribbon made of red silk. He was idly turning the pages of a book in his hand. It appeared as if he was thinking of something fun. His long, shapely eyebrows painted in jet black dye were like morning dew on silk threads. The corners of his lips suddenly hooked up into a bewitching smile that could steal a person's soul. It was as dazzling and eye-catching as the cherry blossoms in March. His well-defined and slender long fingers continuously tapped on the tabletop. His phoenix eyes were tilted up, with a flash of a playful smile passing through his gleaming eyes. Struggling to no avail for the entire trip, the dragon-scaled horse carried His Highness Prince Jin and Su Luo who was beneath the carriage back to Prince Jin's royal manor together. At the manor's entrance, His Highness Prince Jin stepped out of the carriage, and under the escort of a group of people, headed towards the inner courtyard. At this time, Su Luo suddenly was astonished to discover that she had recovered her normal ability to move around like before. Su Luo secretly considered, if she did not leave now, then would she wait until when? If she waited until Nangong discovered her, then her situation would turn sour. Su Luo sneakily rolled out from underneath the carriage, just as she got up and was about to flee, all of a sudden, His Highness Prince Jin turned around. His enchanting phoenix gaze burned into that furtive figure. Are you a newcomer? His Highness Prince Jin's voice was natural, not powerful, angry, or intimidating. Hearing those words, Su Luo's body immediately froze on the spot. Fuck! Why must she be discovered at the last moment? How could she break away? However, Nangong didn't recognize her, right? Su Luo lowered her head. That's right, at this moment, she was disguised as a man. It was reasonable that Prince Jin would not recognize her. His Highness is asking you, are you a new servant recruited to the manor? Seeing Su Luo being slow in replying, Ling Feng coldly swept a glance at her. He stepped forward to grab Su Luo and delivered her before His Highness Prince Jin. Ling Feng's speed was as fast as the wind, the gap in their levels was too great. Su Luo really had no time to resist. Currently, Su Luo was mentally crying with resentment. No matter how uncomfortable she was feeling, on the surface, she still faked a submissive yes-man appearance. Su Luo groveled with fear and trepidation. Yes, this little one is new here, doing odd jobs in the kitchen, just now went in the wrong direction. This little one will go back right now. Having said such, Su Luo's feet prepared to slip quickly away. Who knew? His Highness Prince Jin's black pupils shone with a dark light that rippled uncannily as he nonchalantly said, seeing that you appear to be quite clever, from now on, stay by this king's side and personally serve me. Personally serve him? Su Luo was immediately dumbstruck. What was Nangong Luoyun doing? Was he doing this on purpose? Did he see through her disguise and was deliberately playing with her? Why was she, who was doing just fine, suddenly was asked to personally wait on him? Ling Feng unhappily swept a glance at Su Luo. Why are you still dallying around? Don't delay, go catch up and wait upon him. But Su Luo thought it over again, since her own face had been altered so much, by right, Nangong Luoyun should not have seen through her disguise. Chapter 250, Prince Jin's Royal Manner. 1. Then, in the end, did he or did he not see through her? Su Luo's inner conflict worsened until even her thoughts became knotted together. His Highness Prince Jin was encircled by more than 10 maids, who clustered around him, escorting him as he moved farther and farther away. On one hand, Su Luo was letting her imagination run wild, while on the other hand, she was depressedly holding her forehead. She slowly caught up to that huge procession. Ling Feng gripped his sword with both hands. His eyes were narrowed suspiciously as he sized up this young male servant. To be chosen by His Highness to serve at his side, this kid's future prospects would be limitless and immeasurable. It was just that, Ling Feng suddenly thought that this slippery and evasive-eyed lad felt very familiar. Along the way, Su Luo discovered that Prince Jin's royal manor was simply covered with gold and jade in glorious splendor, the ultimate luxurious and gorgeous palace. A new scenery every 10 steps, with a person at every 5 steps. The security of the manor was exceptionally tight. From her viewpoint, His Highness Prince Jin was dressed from head to toe in a loose gold-edged black gown, with an embroidered hem that swayed and moved like warm clouds. It looked like a foggy mist among the rays of light and shadows. It was the same as his status, so loftily up high and held in awe by the people. Until this very moment, Su Luo finally realized that the man before her eyes was His Highness Prince Jin, a legendary noble existence that gathered innumerable praise. And was not the usual Nangong Luoyun who smiled ingratiatingly and frivolously at her, who was always beseeching and chasing after her, disregarding his own dignity. From out of nowhere, Su Luo suddenly felt a sense of a small loss. The faint sourness passed by in a flash, such that even she wasn't able to catch it. After a short while of effort, everyone had escorted His Highness Prince Jin to his main hall. With the suede white jade flooring, imperial green jade bead curtains and red corals as tall as adult men displayed on either side, the wealth displayed lent a magnanimous, luxurious atmosphere. His Highness Prince Jin took a step into his bedchambers, the serving maids immediately surrounded him, subserviently removing his crown. However, His Highness Prince Jin's deep commanding voice sounded, "Withdraw." All the maids and bodyguards present knelt in obeisance to His Highness Prince Jin. Afterwards, they respectfully left, with a speed almost faster than a person could react to. At this time, Su Luo pressed herself against the wall, trying to minimize her presence. Hearing His Highness Prince Jin's order, she prepared to slip away the moment her toes touched the ground. However, His Highness Prince Jin's gaze, which was as deep as the heavens, steadily set on Su Luo. With a genteel and charming voice, his hand beckoned her over, come here. Su Luo's half-fleeing body abruptly paused and glared in annoyance. However, in someone else's territory, she had no choice but to bow her head. Su Luo stiffly turned her head around, and with her right hand pointed at herself, she squeezed out a false smile. "Your Highness, you called for me?" His Highness Prince Jin had a cold expression, with his long black hair pouring down over his shoulder like a waterfall. He gave off an uninhibited and elegant air. His head turned slightly. He cast his gaze towards Su Luo with eyes that were as bright as obsidian. His thin lips raised delicately. "What is your name?" What was her name? Su Luo grew somewhat vexed. In the end, had Nangong recognized her? Had he recognized her or not? Still need this king to repeat it once more. His Highness Prince Jin's pair of deep, beautiful eyes lazily watched her, carrying a touch of unbridled arrogance. No, it ought to be that he had not found out. Su Luo secretly encouraged herself. The normal Nangong Luyun was not like this. Having thought of this, Su Luo's heart steadied a little. She bowed her head and lowered her eyelids and thought for a long time. Then Su Luo, who was incompetent at coming up with names, softly replied, this humble one is Su Yun." Su Luo completely did not notice the flash of amusement in His Highness Prince Jin's eyes while he was staring at her head. After a while, His Highness Prince Jin lightly coughed and finally spoke up once more. "The last name's not that good, but the given name is not bad." Chapter 251, Prince Jin's Royal Manner. 2. Su Luo covertly rolled her eyes. What did he mean by saying the name was not bad? Didn't it just have an additional Yun letter? Look at that narcissistic manner of his. Without waiting for Su Luo to finish her mental criticism, His Highness Prince Jin once again threw out yet another bomb. "Help this king disrobe." "Ah!" Su Luo exclaimed in surprise. The cry sounded very abrupt. It caused His Highness Prince Jin's gorgeous pink lips to raise with amusement. He leaned down as his slender white finger lightly traced and lifted Su Luo's fine white jaw. This frivolous action, when done by him, somehow held a kind of sensual charm born from natural talent. This could count as being molested, right? Su Luo blinked, momentarily stunned. His Highness Prince Jin met her gaze. His sparkling eyes were bright as the stars while the corners of his lips beguilingly tilted up into a captivating smile. "Are you afraid of this king?" When he spoke, the warmth of his breath lingered on her face before drifting to her sensitive earlobe. It gave her a kind of melting tickle that seemed to have even made her 4 limbs itch. In the end, this sensation also seemed to have infected her heart. Before her eyes was that face of his with its utmost beauty which could make anyone fall head over heels. It could even cause indignation among both humans and gods. Her nose was filled with his masculine smell, as if every breath she took his scent would permeate and fill every corner of her heart and chest. At this moment, Su Luo seemed to have fallen into a trance, with charming colors everywhere. It was as if there was tangled web spread in all 4 directions and she was the sparrow stranded in the middle of it, constantly struggling to break free. However, this poor sparrow would struggle fruitlessly only to tragically discover that there was nowhere to escape to. Su Luo's mind was filled with wild ideas and her small face turned crimson, as if it was extremely hot. From an angle unseen by anyone else, a satisfied smile flashed across the corner of His Highness Prince Jin's lips. "You're afraid of this king?" His voice remained natural, yet it seemed to have grown a little more human-like, with warmth and a touch of playfulness. "How can that be possible?" Su Luo instantly lifted her head, her small face fixed with determination. His Highness Prince Jin languidly and charmingly nodded before he stretched out his arms. His voice was melodious and clear. "Help this king undress." Just why was this man so persistent like this? Su Luo silently cursed without end, yet powerlessly made a sound of agreement. She slumped as she moved a little closer to His Highness Prince Jean and with a bitter face clumsily grasped the forefinger-width wide darkly embroidered black belt and immediately pulled it off with a whoosh. Originally, this kind of servant, His Highness Prince Jean would have already bestowed them 10 feet of red, 1. Yet at this time, he seemed to have great patience as he stood properly and waited, smiling vaguely while he watched the little girl who barely reached his shoulder height grope him. His Highness Prince Jean was very tall, so Su Luo could not help but be on tiptoe. During this affair, her fingers would inevitably touch his fine hair, neck and skin. Glancing up, his pair of cold but seemingly smiling eyes met hers and Su Luo's heart started to grow irritable. Had this bastard finally recognized her or not? In the end, had she been exposed or not? The little devil inside Su Luo was biting her blanket and rolling around on the bed fretting. But, Su Luo definitely could not ask straight out, right? Wouldn't she be exposing herself that way? It was not possible to bring up the subject, right? With Nangong's intelligence, a careless sentence would just arouse his suspicions. Thus it could be said, it was difficult to do. This matter was really very, very difficult to accomplish. In the end, of all the 1,000 and 10,000 things she should not have done, she should not have used Nangong's carriage to hide from Lu Qingfeng's pursuit. This was just like escaping the wolf's den to immediately enter the tiger's den, too. Sigh. Su Luo made a bitter face and slumped as she thought about it. Finally removing an outer robe after much difficulty, Su Luo was about to breathe a sigh of relief when who knew, His Highness Prince Jin's cold face frowned again. Continue with the disrobing. 1. 10 feet of red, is an ancient punishment where a 2-inch thick and 5 feet long board is used to hit the bottom of convicts, hitting countless times until both flesh and bone were bloody pulp. When seen from afar, it is a sheet of red, hence the term 10 feet of red PS. These days, we just give out a pink slip too, escaping the wolf's den to immediately enter the tiger's den, Chinese version of jumping out of the frying pan and into the fire. Chapter 252, Prince Jin's Royal Manner, 3, he was only left wearing a thin white inner robe, what else was there left to take off? Su Luo became furious, she was glaring at His Highness Prince Jin with both eyes. His Highness Prince Jin slightly inclined his head. His incomparably handsome face was expressionless, arrogantly towering over her and looking down at her. Are you going against this king's orders, Su Yun? His tone was very level, very steady and very serious, as if judging this matter completely without any emotion. Su Yun. Hearing such a pain in the ass name, Su Luo was full of resentment. This situation would overwhelm any person. There was nothing she could do about it. Su Luo stepped forward with a bitter expression. However, the first button of the Chinese-style robe was at his Adam's apple. With just one glance, Su Luo could see His Highness Prince Jin's bulging Adam's apple. It was moving up and down erotically, so wild and coarse that made her unable to bear it, as her face blushed from her speeding heartbeat. Su Luo discovered her hands were disappointingly trembling. If it was anyone else, Su Luo would naturally not have such a large reaction. However, this person unfortunately turned out to be Nangong Luyun. With regards to Su Luo, he was special. She clenched and unclenched her fist, Su Luo's fair, slender hand slowly wandered over his beautiful, fine, porcelain-like neck. Su Luo consciously sucked in a deep breath, but unexpectedly, this breath that she inhaled was too sudden and too quick, making her unable to suppress a loud cough from coming out. Cough, cough, cough. Su Luo started to cough really violently, and it took quite a while for her to stop it. Such a clumsy chamberlain, if it was any ordinary person, he would have already been dragged out and beheaded. It was only Su Luo that would not be treated as an ordinary person. Nangong Liuyun's oblique gaze that was full of deep meaning unblinkingly stared at Su Luo. Su Luo somewhat embarrassingly lifted her eyes, meeting His Highness Prince Jin's eyes that were as unperturbed as a clear spring. Only, behind his eyes, he was not at all calm. Are you afraid of this king? A trace of curiosity flashed across His Highness Prince Jin's beautiful eyes. Those star-like black pupils unblinkingly gazed at Su Luo. No way. Absolutely not. How could she be afraid of him? Su Luo, whether in the previous life or this life, did not fear anyone. Then, why did you become so nervous like this? Could it be, you like this king? His Highness Prince Jin pretended to be worried, without any indignation nor anger, he looked straight at her. His tone was gentle and lazy, extremely pleasant to hear. Cough cough cough, Su Luo choked on her own saliva, I'm a man. Don't you know I'm a man? Could it be that His Highness Prince Jin has an interest in men? In an instant, the surrounding temperature dropped to the freezing point. His Highness Prince Jin's ruthless gaze fiercely swept across Su Luo's appearance. In a split second, Su Luo felt as if a sharp sword was stabbing towards her chest. It was extremely terrifying. The surroundings became very quiet, neither of them spoke. Now, Su Luo wished she could slap herself. How could she just, right now, she wasn't at the Sunset Mountain Range, but at Prince Jin's royal manor. She was not Su Luo, but rather a little servant called Su Yun. This mouth, she couldn't stop it. Su Luo was so vexed that she could just die. Just at this time, Nangong Luyun shot her a frosty glance. This is the first and also the very last time. Although His Highness Prince Jin did not say it clearly, Su Luo was very clear about the meaning in his words. This was the last time he allowed her to speak thoughtless words. Many thanks, Your Highness. In the end, Su Luo could only brace herself and agreed. Humph, it's better to watch what you say. His Highness Prince Jin sneered. Su Luo started to undo the buttons on His Highness Prince Jin's clothing. The first button. The second button. The third button. Finally, it was all unbuttoned. Su Luo let out a huge breath in relief. This breath carried with it a little sound, drawing His Highness Prince Jin's tranquil pair of eyes to sweep towards her. Now, his inner robe had slipped open on both sides, exposing the beautiful, exquisitely sculpted porcelain skin inside. The two buds on his chest was faintly discernible, giving off an alluring and enticing radiance. Chapter 253, Prince Jin's Royal Manor. 4. Su Luo was stupefied by the beautiful scene in front of her. Temporarily, she could not return to her senses. Wait upon this king during my bath. His Highness Prince Jin's voice was demonically charming and languid. Inadvertently, a faint smile full of roguish meanings surfaced in his eyes. A pity Su Luo was gaping blankly at the beautiful scene in front of her. Thus, she was unaware of the corner of His Highness Prince Jin's mouth evoking a slight self-satisfied smug smile. Wait upon this king during my bath, didn't you hear what I said? His Highness Prince Jin's pair of pupils had the luster of gems. He turned around and walked towards a side wing in the manor. His handsome body was sculpted and tall, giving off an outstanding and noble aura. Even the view of his back was just like the gods, so distinguished that it made people look up to him worshipfully. To bathe? These two words spread to Su Luo's ear, was transmitted to her central nervous system, then the brain, to process. Finally, information was sent back to her consciousness. In the next instant, Su Luo's entire body was unable to move. To bathe? Wait upon him while he was bathing. Nangong Luyun, this bastard, was he teasing her? Was he playing with her? Su Luo clenched her hands into tight fists. She was silently cursing him in her heart. At this time, although she didn't want to admit it, Su Luo had a faint suspicion. Could it be that this bastard really had an inkling and had made out that it was her? Should she wash her hands of this and immediately leave? Or should she directly flip her lid at him? In Su Luo's head, the rational part of her and the impulsive part of her fought again and again. They fought until it was hard to separate them, and also difficult to determine the outcome of this battle. While she was having difficulty making a decision, His Highness Prince Jin suddenly stood still. His beautiful eyes turned back, calmly and composedly casting a quick glance at her, with his dark red lips curving upwards. The result of going against this king, you could automatically imagine. A threat. This was indeed a naked threat. If she was indeed going to be dragged out and punished with caning, then in the end, wouldn't she have exposed her own identity? Rather than weeping bitterly and begging for forgiveness at that time, it was better to grin and bear with it now and carefully wait upon him just this once. When she found an opportunity. Wait until she was out of Nangong's line of sight. She would immediately look for an opportunity to escape from Prince Jin's royal manor. That's right, she would promptly flee far away. Su Luo made a fist on the sly to encourage herself. She squeezed out a stiff smile on her face, and in a flattering manner, she took a few small quick steps to catch up to him. What kind of thing is His Highness saying? How could this lowly servant dare to disobey you? I have now come immediately to wait upon you. His Highness Prince Jin nodded slightly, as if he was very satisfied with Su Luo's reaction. Such a huge palatial room in the side wing, with steam rising in spirals leading to a dense mist. His Highness Prince Jin wasn't wearing a stitch of clothing on his body. His jade-like body was soaking in the hot springs water. His pitch-black hair as black as ink was loosely tied with a band of red silk. He looked sensually alluring and wildly coarse. Small drops of water rolled down his beautiful back that was as smooth as jade. The clear and translucent droplets dripped onto the water surface, setting off tiny ripples with every drop. The exquisite, beautiful, porcelain-like skin amongst the dense steam was suffused with a faint pink color. Water droplets continuously dripped down, even though it was only a beautiful back, it was already enough to birth an appetizingly steaming sexy work of art that could suffocate a person. Although it wasn't the first time she saw it, Su Luo still felt some tightness in her throat. She slightly turned her face away. Evildoer, ah, evildoer. He was an evildoer from the 9th layer of the heavens. Why would he come to earth to wreak havoc on humanity? This kind of evildoer, who was able to withstand against him? Come here. Just when Su Luo was in the midst of indulging in flights of fancy, His Highness Prince Jin turned to the side and looked at her. A pair of beautiful pupils that was like the black pearls in the deep sea gleamed dazzlingly, unblinkingly staring at her. Just 2 short words, yet they carried a king's powerful prestige that would not tolerate any opposition. Su Luo secretly raised an eyebrow. You want me to go over, then I'll go over. In any case, the person who was being looked at all over wasn't her. Besides, this rarely seen beautiful scenery in the world, if she didn't enjoy it properly, wouldn't it be such a waste? Better yet, give her a camera to take some shots of his nudity, presumably, it would sell for a high price, right? Su Luo, while silently cursing him, walked over to His Highness Prince Jin's side. She crouched down respectfully. Your Highness, what orders do you have? Chapter 254, Prince Jin's Royal Manor, 5. Originally as a chamberlain she was required to kneel and stoop low in humble respect towards His Highness Prince Jin, but Su Luo took this opportunity to take a shortcut and merely kneeled on a single knee. And His Highness Prince Jin also pretended to not see it, as if he was still unaware. Give this king a back massage. His Highness Prince Jin calmly tossed Su Luo a loofah clothing, as if by rights he should naturally enjoy the service provided by her. Now, his beautiful back had been steamed by the heat till the water on his skin was giving off a glossy luster, effused with faint pink fluorescence. It was simply seductive enough to make a person commit a criminal offense. Evildoer, ah, evildoer. Su Luo's heart silently cursed, although her hand never stopped. Through the soft loofah clothing she started to carefully scrub his back clean. His Highness Prince Jin's phoenix-like eyes narrowed slightly, carrying a trace of mistiness from the water vapor, seemingly very content. The corners of Su Luo's mouth curled into a faint smile full of an indiscernible meaning. Back massage? Nangong Luyun, you are really enjoying this, huh? It's a pity, you left your back unguarded and completely exposed to others. You were truly audacious. One of Su Luo's hand was carefully rubbing his back, it kept on scrubbing his back, while her other white and slender hand noiselessly approached His Highness Prince Jin's snow-white neck. She lifted that hand and skillfully chopped down at that place. In such close proximity, the completely unguarded His Highness Prince Jin. In a normal course of events, it was a strike that would certainly succeed. However, the disparity in their levels was too big and their strengths far too distant from each other. To the extent that the action His Highness Prince Jin took could only be seen as a blurred and lightning-fast moment. It was like his back grew eyes and his fine-boned, slender large hand deftly gripped Su Luo's hand that was striking down like a knife. He easily spun Su Luo to be in front of him with a tug. All that could be heard was a bang sound. Su Luo's whole body had been whipped into the water's surface. Then before she could react, His Highness Prince Jin had already sat her onto his thigh. He unhurriedly tidied up her black hair that had been drenched and disheveled by the water. That calm and composed appearance of his, made Su Luo really want to send a punch his way. Moreover, as he slowly tidied up her hair for her, he also let out a gasp of surprise. Su Luo angrily glared at him, but His Highness Prince Jin merely began to laugh bewitchingly. Strange, it's strange. How did this king's little manservant turn into a woman? Su Luo's makeup disguise was very simple, after being soaked in water, her original appearance would appear. Nangong Luyun, that's enough from you. Su Luo angrily glared at him. She felt that she had lost a great deal of face. Not only did her sneak attack fail, she was even caught red-handed. This by itself wasn't much, but unexpectedly, even her disguise had been uncovered and her identity was exposed on the spot. With this situation, wasn't her previous patience and endurance all for naught? Moreover, with this vile man Nangong Liuyun's character, she doesn't know in the future how he would make fun of her. See, wasn't he mocking her right now? Seeing the little girl in front of him huffing and puffing angrily. Then recalling the act she had just put on disguised as his manservant, Nangong Luyun suddenly felt that it was really very funny. The more he thought, the funnier he felt it was. Suddenly, he laughed so hard that his whole body slouched against the suet white jade wall with both of his hands pounding the water surface. It seemed as if he had to laugh so badly that he couldn't hold it back anymore. Hey! Nangong Luyun, that's enough from you, stop laughing. If you keep laughing, be careful that I'll beat you to death. The more he laughed, the more humiliated Su Luo felt. Therefore she stood up flying into a rage because of the humiliation. Her hands were at her waist in a threatening posture. Okay, no more laughing, no more laughing. Nangong Luyun held back his laughter with great difficulty, before raising his eyes to meet Su Luo's angry little face. A split second later, he let out a sound and started laughing all over again. Nangong Luyun. Su Luo pounced at him to try to pinch his cheeks. However, just as she was approaching, Nangong Luyun's slender calf that was submerged in water hooked over ever so slightly. Suddenly, Su Luo who was standing became unsteady and directly threw herself towards his rock-solid strong chest. Chapter 255, Prince Jin's Royal Manor, 6, a bang sound echoed. Su Luo was under the impression that she would have been knocked until she was black and blue all over. However, she discovered she had tumbled onto a strong and robust chest. Nangong's pair of hands was at her lower back steadying her, making the impact of her knocking against it not as hard. Could there be a more suggestive action that carried more weight than throwing herself into someone's arms? Su Luo's face had a long-suffering expression, wishing she could hit her chest just once. Nangong Luyun, let go. Su Luo seethingly scowled as she angrily said. Are you sure? Nangong Luyun looked at the little servant's fuming appearance. The more he looked, the more adorable he thought she appeared. He couldn't help but to extend a hand to pinch those fuming, pink, tender cheeks. Such a pretty little servant girl, why should you disguise yourself as a little manservant that's not worth keeping? What a pity, it is a pity. Mentioning this, Su Luo's heart became even more infuriated. You already knew, right? Just now you were just making fun of me, am I right? Nangong Luyun, tell me the truth now. Su Luo fastened onto his neck. The expression on her face was clearly that of flying into a rage from humiliation. Nangong Luyun was calm and composed with a faint smile on his face. He grabbed onto her slender waist and guided her straight in front of his body. The completely unguarded Su Luo's body ended up sitting upon his thigh. What do you want me to say? Nangong Luyun's matchless handsome face was brimming with an extremely devious smiling expression. My foolish Luo child, you are just too cute. Even your acting skills, okay, it was a little bit on the clumsy side. Su Luo had a mouthful of blood stifled in her throat, not going up nor down, suffocating her until it made her feel extremely unwell. She just knew it. Nangong Luyun, this evildoer, had already known her true identity. Starting from when she squeezed underneath the dragon-scaled horse's carriage, he knew. That's right, what the dragon-scaled horse loathed the most was the approach of strangers. She was able to squeeze underneath the carriage without being driven away. Wasn't this just like directly exposing her identity? How many people could get the recognition of the dragon-scaled horse? Fancy that. Before, she had all along thought her own performance was very good. Her acting even fooled Nangong, now that she thought about it. Su Luo shamefully covered her face. How humiliating. Nangong Luyun patted her little head, as the corner of his mouth lifted into smile full of a devilish air. Okay, it's fine. Even this king doesn't mind it, why do you care about it? Rest assured this king won't disregard you, okay? I beg you not to say more. Su Luo wanted to weep but had no tears. She turned away with her hands covering her face. She just wanted to run away. Embarrassing, truly embarrassing. Nangong Luyun laughingly hugged her to him. Don't be afraid, no matter how much face you lose. You are still this king's people. Teasing me is really fun, right? Su Luo stood up. From her high vantage point, she looked down at him, meeting with that handsome face brimming with a devilish charm. The anger in her heart couldn't come out. Would it have killed you to admit earlier that you recognized me? However, don't you feel it was really fun? Nangong Luyun followed after and stood up from within the bathing pool. His white, jade-like, tall and lanky body was completely laid bare right in front of Su Luo. His ink-black hair with water droplets rolling down drop by drop. The two flower-like buds on his strong and brawny chest shone with an enticing gloss, while the contours of his waist were perfect. Two long and slender legs stood ramrod straight. This body was simply God's most perfect masterpiece, another one didn't exist. This man, damn his erotic sex appeal. Damn his enticing attractiveness. Su Luo somewhat embarrassingly turned her face away, but her mouth unyieldingly said, very fun, fuck no. Isn't it you who found it amusing? She was the one that was being toyed with, okay? Okay. Nangong Luyun laughingly begged for forgiveness. His lanky but powerful legs step by step closed in on Su Luo. Finally, he stood directly in front of her, his pair of deep, star-like eyes firmly locked her in place. Both of his hands held onto her slender shoulders, the corner of his mouth curved into a devilishly charming smile. Such an obedient Luo child, you tell me, how do you want to punish this king, so your anger will be appeased? Chapter 256, Prince Jin's Royal Manor, 7. Not waiting for Su Luo to answer, Nangong Luyun chuckled roguishly again as he leaned close to Su Luo's ears and leisurely exhaled a breath before he added another sentence, or else, this king can warm your bed as an apology instead. Su Luo's small face reddened as she glowered at him. Nangong Luyun, is it even possible for you to be more shameless? As expected, Nangong Luyun laughed even more shamelessly. He bewitchingly hooked up the corners of his mouth as he reached out a hand to brush the tip of Su Luo's nose. The corners of his phoenix eyes raised slightly. You prefer being on top. This king can also lower his pride a little and voluntarily lie down for you, yes. This person was certainly shameless to an extreme. There was simply no limit. If she had a contest with him of who was more thick-skinned, she herself would definitely be the loser. Once Su Luo realized the situation, she resolutely decided to change the topic. She pulled a bathrobe from the rack and threw it fiercely at his face. She raised her brow and coldly said, "Speak only after you're dressed." Being His Highness Prince Jin and behaving this way, what kind of scandal would this cause? Nangong Luyun was startled at her words. After a blank stare, he started to laugh uproariously, while he expressed extreme delight. "Little Luo Luo, don't you feel that talking this way is more frank?" Nangong Luyun gestured at the situation between them right now. Nangong Luyun was undoubtedly naked, and the current Su Luo, due to falling into the hot spring pool, was drenched from head to toe. Her clothes were stuck onto her body, revealing and accentuating all her exquisite curves. The 15-year-old Su Luo was already displaying some qualities that were worth looking at. Nangong Luyun's pair of charming flirtatious eyes firmly locked onto Su Luo's. He imprudently eyed Su Luo's softly drenched chest, and his gaze darkened, a lecherous atmosphere brewed. This person. Su Luo regretted that she couldn't use a single slap to knock him unconscious. Huffing angrily, Su Luo snatched away the bathrobe in his hands and immediately tightly wrapped herself in it. The large robe wrapped her entire petite yet fine and delicate body. Only a very small head and that pair of clear large eyes were exposed, which made her appear rather innocent. Nangong Luyun chuckled before he pulled Su Luo and had her sit down beside the pool. He scooped up water in both hands and gently began to wash her ink-black hair. Seeing such, Su Luo's eyes wrinkled. Being pampered like this felt very unfamiliar, very strange, but also felt rather nice. His sudden tenderness was a little bit too much for her, but Su Luo did not interrupt his thoughts because she understood Nangong Luyun. Everything this man did always had a motive. As expected, while Nangong Luyun tenderly washed Su Luo's soft black hair, his fingers moved in slow, indescribably gentle and meticulous strokes. The corners of his lips once again curled with devilish severity as he said, "Silly girl, you didn't even realize that someone had imprinted you, so stupid." Ah. Su Luo lifted her head and her puzzled eyes met Nangong Luyun's pair of heavenly black eyes. She inquired soundlessly. "Wasn't it that no matter how you disguised yourself or hid, you were still found by that Lu family's boy?" A murderous intent flashed across Nangong Luyun's eyes, yet the large hand that stroked through her hair was still exceedingly gentle. "You knew?" Su Luo was indeed extremely curious. To be honest, during this whole time, she had been constantly analyzing this problem. Why was it that regardless of how she disguised herself or hid, Lu Qingfeng could always find her? This question had indeed perplexed her greatly. Nangong Luyun's large heated palm brushed over her soft white skin as his charming eyes lowered a little and the corners of his lips lifted into a bloodthirsty sneer. However, his gentle voice bore not a thread of smoke nor fire from his anger. "Silly girl, you don't even know about tracing imprints, how are you even going to survive on this continent?" Chapter 257, Prince Jin's Royal Manor, 8. There were actually people who dared to put a tracking imprint on his girl. Good, very good, extremely good. Even though Nangong Luyun was smiling, his smiling expression never reached his eyes. People who understood him knew that at this moment, he was truly angry. And once His Highness Prince Jin became angry, the consequences would absolutely be exceptionally grave. Tracking imprint? What kind of thing is that? Su Luo's head was raised like a curious baby. In her memories, this kind of high-level information indeed didn't exist. Nangong Luyun was tenderly washing her hair, as a grim and murderous expression flashed through his eyes. However, his voice was still incomparably soft and gentle. Tracking imprint. Ah. It is a kind of tool, and only a 7th rank or higher expert could make such an imprint mark. Lu Qingfeng's family had a 7th rank or higher expert. Su Luo's heart was slightly startled. That they don't have. However, this tracking imprint in fact can be purchased at an auction with a lot of gold coins. Nangong Liuyun's slender fingers gently wrung her hair dry. Afterwards, he used a clean embroidered towel to wipe Su Luo's jet-black long hair. Do you know where the opponent had placed the tracking imprint? A light bulb suddenly lit up in Su Luo's mind. With a distracted and stunned expression, she pointed to her own hair. Here. Nangong Luyun indulgently and in a spoiling manner hooked her nose a few times. His eyes were filled with tender sentiments. You are still not considered very dumb. Su Luo helplessly sighed. It's no wonder. It's no wonder that Lu Qingfeng could dispatch people that followed my trail. As it turned out, it was because of this. But since now it's washed off, would it be fine just like this? That will depend on who is washing it. Nangong Liuyun's pair of flowery eyes were giving off soft waves of an intoxicatingly spoiling expression that could drown a person. If you were to wash it yourself, it would take you until you reached the 7th rank before you can wash it away. What? At this moment, Su Luo was practically fuming with rage between gritted teeth. Damn you Lu Qingfeng, you actually planted such a malicious tracking imprint on this lady. If this lady didn't reach the 7th rank, if she didn't have the 7th ranked Nangong Liuyun's help in washing it off, then even if she was buried under the mud, she would still have been found. At this moment, with regards to this unknown world, Su Luo had a kind of unprecedented reverence in her heart. No need to be afraid, you have this king here. Nangong Luyun stood up while speaking, his strong arms bringing her into his embrace. His eyes were firmly locked onto her, resolutely not allowing her to escape. With this king present, who dares to not grow eyes and bully you? Wants to court death. Su Luo lightly returned his look, the corner of her mouth rose slightly. She quietly and coldly said, I don't need your borrowed kindness, my own hatred, I will avenge personally. The light in Nangong Liuyun's eyes dimmed for a split second, but very quickly, it once again restored its dazzling luster. This king actually forgot, this girl's talent is at the pinnacle of the best. Come over, let this king have a look. How much progress has this king's little princess made in her cultivation? Before Su Luo could react, her wrist was already being held by him. She also didn't know how long Nangong Luyun was going to test her. He merely placed his white, jade-like lanky finger on her wrist. In merely a split second, Nangong Liuyun's beautiful pair of eyes, which used to looking down on the world, became serious, then started blankly as if in complete disbelief. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly. After taking a deep breath, he then fixed his gaze on Su Luo. His eyes were full of shock. You are already now at the 2nd rank? She was not only at 2nd rank, but also at the peak of the 2nd rank. It was very possible that in the next second, she would break through to the 3rd rank. How could this be possible? Obviously just half a month ago when they parted, she was still a little good for nothing. She didn't have a bit of spirit strength back then. How could there be a person who, in such a short period of half a month, from nothing to having it, from 0, immediately jumping up to the 2nd rank? Chapter 258, Prince Jin's Royal Manor. 9. Even the genius among geniuses, the legendary His Highness Prince Jin, was stunned stupid by Su Luo's kind of promotion speed. In the end, how did you practice? A touch of astonishment passed through Nangong Liuyun's normally indifferent gaze. Even Nangong was surprised by this, so her cultivation speed was really so amazing? Thinking up to here, Su Luo inevitably became somewhat proud of herself. She raised an eyebrow, smiled and very innocently said, just causally practiced some and was promoted, was it supposed to be very difficult? Nangong Luyun speechlessly patted her head. A faint tender expression appeared on his face, he let out a sigh, exceptional talent is only just like this. I really want to know, girl, once you grow up, what kind of alarming and extraordinarily splendid person you will become. Su Luo looked at him with an somewhat inquisitive expression, her beautiful pupils lit up and quickly roamed around. Don't tell me my cultivation speed is faster than yours. Nangong Luyun really didn't want to speak to her anymore. His poised and noble handsome face had a complex expression. He finally answered after a long time, this king cultivated to the second rank using a period of 6 months. Still remembered at that time the teacher said that this king's cultivation speed, since time immemorial, is ranked first. Now you have smashed this record. His straight, ink-black hair gave off a slight gloss. His body had a faint aromatic fragrance. He unblinkingly stared at her with a mysterious and bewitchingly hypnotizing gaze that was as bright as the starlight. Even Nangong used a period of 6 months before reaching the second rank, she herself merely needed about half a month. The arc at the corner of Su Luo's mouth started to expand. It continued to expand until finally she simply couldn't suppress her happiness anymore and almost let out cheering sounds. Bang! Nangong Luyun lightly tapped her head, his deep black eyes carried a touch of seriousness and prudence. Girl, no matter how you did it, but bear in mind, you must follow the right path. Cultivation is not something that happens overnight and it requires endless years of time. The further you go, the harder the demons in your heart will be to overcome, do you understand? Could it be that Nangong thought she had strayed to the demonic path of cultivation? In fact, she was clearly practicing the great dimensional imprint given to her by the venerable divine dragon. Furthermore, she had matched it with the slowed time in her space to achieve such a fast practice speed. Su Luo once again stopped her words. Should she tell him the matter concerning the venerable divine dragon? If she told him, then she might not be able to protect the little divine dragon's identity. Nangong Luyun, did he deserve her wholehearted trust? At this moment, Su Luo hesitated. Nangong Luyun's dazzling star-like eyes dimmed for a split second. His lazy expression also had a touch of hurt. He vigorously rubbed her head. His tone was brisk and blithe. What are you thinking about? You can be at ease. Would this king really covet your cultivation methods? In a split second, Su Luo almost blurted out the words, however suddenly, an incomparably beautiful and delicate face flickered through her head. That was his childhood sweetheart, his cherished girlfriend that he indulgently pampered. She really wanted to ask, if she told him, then if one day the Jade Lake's fairy interrogated him, would he tell her? In just a split second of time, the words on the tip of Su Luo's tongue stopped. She really didn't want to think a person's heart would be so sinister, and she also couldn't bear to use this secret to probe Nangong because it would be too cruel. She still couldn't wholeheartedly give her trust to him. Nangong Luyun turned his head away. Outside, the warm spring had arrived with flowers blooming, the sunlight was just right. But he was unable to feel the warmth. This him that was feeling dejected had his mood instantly hit the bottom. Nangong, taking note that his mood was not good, Su Luo wanted to step forward to comfort him. Silly girl, tidy up your things, then you can go out so as to not catch a cold. Nangong's pleasant manner was like a tempered cloud and gentle wind as he rubbed her head. His actions were as gentle as before and his eyes still carried the same indulgent spoiling manner. However, this made Su Luo's heart tightly clench in pain. Chapter 259, Prince Jin's Royal Manor, 10. Watching the scene of Nangong Luyun's back as he took large strides to walk away, Su Luo's hands clenched tightly into fists. She knew, her split second of hesitation hurt him. However, was she wrong? If Nangong Luyun was simply Nangong Luyun, based on him protecting her and her trust in him, there shouldn't be a lot of misunderstandings and doubt between them. However, in reality, facts weren't always that simple. At least from what she knew, that Jade Lake's fairy could influence Nangong Luyun. Even though he knew the other party sent people to chase after her to kill her, he was still able to fool her without changing his expression. This kind of him, how could he ask her to bet all her trust on him? She could believe him, but she could not guarantee her secrets between Nangong Luyun and the Jade Lake's fairy. Therefore, in order to protect herself, she held fast to her secret. This way, she wasn't wrong. She shouldn't have done something wrong, right? The great bathing hall had a dense mist with rising steam. Taking into account Su Luo's current mood, the dense layers of mist confused her and she couldn't find a way out. Since her fake identity was already unmasked by Nangong, she didn't need to act as a fawning lowly servant again. Now, there was no need for her to stay at Prince Jin's royal manor. Su Luo shook her head to wake herself up. Afterwards, she began to tidy up her own clothing. Here, there weren't any women's clothing, just Nangong Liuyan's spacious embroidered robe. No choice, Su Luo could only wear his clothes for now. The clothes were made from the highest quality of heavenly silk. It was extremely soft and silky. Furthermore, it contained a little of the warmth that belonged only to him. Su Luo felt somewhat uncomfortable, but since the situation that appeared now was like this, so she could only leave it as it is. After she put on a hat, Su Luo directly walked towards the exit. However, before she could walk out of Nangong Liuyan's manor, she was stopped by the people at the gate. At the manor gate, stood a row of armored guards. Every one of them had a dense cold and harsh expression, giving off a powerful deterrent force. "Miss, please stop." The chief guard among them said coldly with a solemn expression. "I want to go out now." Su Luo frowned. Why could she not go out? Who set up this rule? Daring to directly say His Highness Prince Jin's real name, that was a taboo. The chief guard stared at Su Luo with alarm and trepidation. His face revealed nothing but merely blocked her path. Without His Highness's orders, people without tasks and such are not allowed to come and go from the manor as they please. "Please, Miss Su, don't make things difficult for us." Su Luo smiled. "Didn't I, a person without anything to do, just come in? Now I want to go out, please step aside. I don't want to make things difficult for you people." The chief guard's face was grave, not tolerant of any haggling. Without His Highness's written order, nobody could come and go as they please. "Miss Su, you had better go back. If you insist on going out, then you only need to get His Highness's written order." If she could get Nangong Liuyan's written order, then why would she come here to try her luck? Simpleton. Su Luo secretly grinded her teeth. When she entered, she was disguised as a lowly manservant. Now going out, she had changed back to her real appearance. If it weren't for Nangong Liuyan letting them know earlier, how could the chief guard recognize her? And to still say this wasn't a sly plot by Nangong Liuyan? "If I insist on leaving, will you people use force?" Su Luo glowered at them coldly. "Then we could only offend. We will personally knock you unconscious and drag you back to deliver you to His Highness Prince Jin." The chief guard lowered his eyes but responded matter-of-factly. Moreover, his attitude appeared to be very firm. "Knocked unconscious, then dragged back to be handed to His Highness Prince Jin." Su Luo was so furious she made a fist. Without strength, then she couldn't be firm. Even such a small captain of the guard could firmly say out loud to knock her unconscious, such disgraceful words. Su Luo pointed at them, practically fuming with rage between gritted teeth. "Don't you people know, you must never casually offend a woman?" "Don't know," the guards said in unison. Su Luo almost fell over. Chapter 260, Prince Jin's Royal Manor, 11, Nangong Liuyan, "This debt, I will carefully calculate for you." Su Luo bit down on her teeth, with an expression like she was on the verge of exploding. After asking a servant, she found out that Nangong Liuyan was in the dining hall. Su Luo walked directly towards the hall. When Nangong Liuyan saw Su Luo, the corner of his mouth was curved into a demonically enchanting smiling expression, and he briskly beckoned with his hand, "Little Luo Luo, quickly come over here. Coming early is not as good as coming here in a timely manner, you came just in time." Su Luo stood firmly in front of him and indifferently cast a glance at him. Nangong Liuyan appeared not to be aware of Su Luo's anger. He seemed to be in a cheerful mood as he pulled her over, pressing the taciturn her to sit down on a chair made from red sandalwood. He spoke to the respectful servant standing on the side, "This king's little Luo Luo is hungry, why have the dishes not been served yet?" Faced with Nangong Liuyun's enthusiasm, Su Luo seemed to be speechless. This man was really strange. Before, he was coldly scowling at her in the bathing chamber until they finally parted on bad terms. He had a sad expression back then, but now it seemed as if that had never happened. All the servants standing on the side had an incredulous expression as they looked at their master, His Highness. Their gazes clearly expressed how unimaginable they found the situation, to the point that they almost didn't hear Nangong Liuyun's order. "Why haven't you quickly left?" Nangong Liuyun's voice was clear and moderate, but it had a slightly furious might that was powerfully threatening. The servants looked at each other in dismay with terrified expressions. They nervously and tensely withdrew to bring the dishes without delay. It was also no wonder they would forget themselves in this way. After all, they had served His Highness in Prince Jin's royal manor for more than 10 years. They had never seen His Highness treat someone this enthusiastically. He was so enthusiastic that he had lowered his tone to seem almost humble. Moreover, he was treating a woman this way. Prince Jin's royal manor had always prevented women from entering. Even Her Highness the Princess would wait at the manor's door, not daring to take half a step into the door. However, now, they unexpectedly saw a woman sit at the same table as His Highness. Moreover, His Highness was actually unexpectedly also coaxing her. Was this still His Highness Prince Jin, the one they respected as a god from the 9th layers of heaven? Su Luo wasn't aware of her special treatment in Prince Jin's royal manor. She also wasn't aware that the servants looked at her with an expression as if watching an immortal fairy. She only felt that she was almost about to be infuriated to death by Nangong Liuyun. What was the matter with this guy? Why was he incessantly picking up various foods and putting them into her bowl? Okay, quickly eat your own food. The stuff in my bowl have almost piled up into a small mountain. Su Luo had no alternative but to shield the bowl in front of her and resentfully glare at Nangong Liuyun. Nangong Liuyun, do you want to fatten me to death? The circle of servants standing on the side, without exception, inhaled a breath of cold air. Had this young lady lost her mind? She actually dared to speak like this to His Highness? They sympathetically closed their eyes. They were able to forecast that afterwards, on top of the table, it was sure to change into purgatory, it would be covered with a river of blood. Because His Highness would absolutely, never ever, tolerate someone angrily rebuking him. People still remembered the last time in the Imperial Palace, Marquis and family's third miss, because she admired His Highness, had said a few extra words in front of His Highness when he was eating. That pitiful miss was sent directly flying by one palm strike from His Highness and spit out blood on the spot. Afterwards, she took 3 full months to heal from her internal injuries. However, what made them all taken aback was in their eyes, the callous and heartless His Highness Prince Jin, who was like Azura from hell. He was actually smiling in a devilishly charming manner nonstop. Moreover, he actually took the opportunity to lean in close to that young lady. His hand, which was as fine as white jade, lifted up her clean and fair tapered chin. His gaze was filled with an intoxicating gentle feelings with a touch of seductiveness when looking at her. Seductive, a touch of seductiveness, even though using these kind of words to describe His Highness's expression seemed to be odd. However, in fact, there didn't seem to be another word that would be a better fit. Chapter 261, Prince Jin's Royal Manor, 12. Moreover, Their Highness Prince Jin actually used that sort of tempting and coaxing tone, a soft, misty rain-like voice, to speak. Luo Luo, be obedient, you are so thin, eating a bit more will help you grow up faster. Heaven, heaven, heavens, ah! The circle of servants collectively hyperventilated. They were simply in chaos at his manor. Was this still that unwavering killer that cut down everyone, killing people as if cutting up vegetables, His Highness who, due to a brief disagreeable remark, would be fond of cutting off a hand or foot, that Prince Jin? Who had possessed the body of their family's highness? This was simply too terrifying. However, the present Nangong Liuyun, as far as Su Luo was concerned, was someone she was best familiar with. Because all along, in front of her, Nangong Luyun had always been in this frivolous, devilishly charming and alluring mode. Therefore, she was not even a bit unable to adapt to this. Su Luo single-handedly pried off his finely jointed finger, and angrily shot him a glare. When eating, you should eat it properly, stop groping around, you don't even understand even a little bit of the rules. Once these words were spoken, Nangong Luyun didn't seem to have any reaction, but the circle of servants were all scared silly. They simply could not imagine that in this world, the miss in front of their eyes would dare to rush forward to throw away her life. How could she dare to speak those words to His Highness? She deserved the greatest praise for courage, and she was too incomparably brave. They deeply sympathized with the bitter experience Su Luo was about to suffer. How, however, they were astonished again. Their family's highness unexpectedly wasn't angry. Not only was he not angry, but instead, he openly started to laugh heartily. He was laughing so hard that his body started to rock back and forth. Once he finished laughing, wouldn't he execute the punishment? Nope, he didn't. Their Highness not only didn't penalize this miss, but he was actually pleased as a punch and hugged her. He was continuously trying to exploit any chance to get closer to her. The more that miss tried to resist, the more enthusiastic he became. The style was simply like that of a lecher. Finished, His Highness's body was definitely possessed. If it were not so, then this miss would have already died 8 to 10 times. Then, how could she still be sitting at the dining table eating her meal? No matter how shocked, incredulous and mind-boggled the servants were, Nangong Luyun was just like so, forcing Su Luo to swallow down that enormous bowl of food. Su Luo, without much choice, was finally able to put down her bowl and chopsticks. Her cold gaze looked straight at Nangong Luyun. Okay, now that I have also eaten a meal, shouldn't you let me return to my manor? She had already come out for a while now. If she returned too late, she couldn't guess what other things might happen in the manor. Su Qing and Su Shi were both covetously watching her courtyard. Nangong Luyun calmly placed a hand on the table, slanted his head, and faintly smilingly glanced at her. Little Luo, you really want to go back? What do you mean? Su Luo's expression tightened. Nangong Luyun's perfectly composed expression while watching Su Luo made her heart feel somewhat scared. Nangong Luyun's brows nodded, then a smile appeared on his handsome face, and opening his arms, his hands beckoned towards Su Luo. Su Luo suspiciously threw a glance at him, but couldn't contain the curiosity in her heart. She took a few small steps to walk towards him until she stood firmly in front of him, and said with a frown, "If you have something to say, say it. Don't be so mysterious and secretive." Able to use this kind of tone and attitude to speak to His Highness Prince Jin, in the entire world, there was only one person, Su Luo. Only Su Luo herself didn't know it. Nangong Luyun didn't seem to mind the tiniest bit with regards to Su Luo's attitude. He stretched out his hand and with one pull, encircled Su Luo in his embrace. When Su Luo started to struggle, he was unruffled and calmly said one sentence, "Little Luo, based on your intelligence, could it be that you have never thought about the current situation?" Chapter 262, Prince Jin's Royal Manor, 13, Situation. Su Luo frowned and didn't speak further. Okay, put yourself in his shoes and think it over. If you were that despicable boy from the Lu family, right, what would you do afterwards? Nangong Luyun's warm and heated breath puffed out near Su Luo's sensitive ear, messing with Su Luo until she started to itch from the bottom of her heart. Su Luo pushed that handsome face far, far away, and lowered her head to start pondering this deeply. If she was Lu Qingfeng, since he had set down such a huge capital to track her, then he definitely wouldn't give up so easily. Since he had clearly followed the other party along and knew that she had entered Prince Jin's royal manor, then. Su Luo suddenly lifted her head, unaware that Nangong Luyun was in the process of moving closer to her. The bang sound rang loudly. Su Luo's forehead hit Nangong Liuyan's nose, it became so sore that the rim of his eyes was slightly red. Su Luo's heart was remorseful, feeling embarrassed, she helped him massage his nose. Nothing wrong, right? Is it serious? Seldom would she get to see Nangong Liuyan suffer defeat in front of her. On her face, her expression was worried, but her heart was already flipping over in laughter. It's important, very important. It's serious, very serious. Nangong covered his nose and swept a glance at her with a plaintive expression. Hearing this, Su Luo rightfully smiled coldly. She never thought that His Highness Prince Jin would act like a child and throw a tantrum. It was indeed really amusing. She was seldom in such a good mood, so she used a happy voice to coax him. Then you say, what should we do? Help me blow on it. Nangong Liuyan wrinkled his brows, pointed to his red and swollen nose. Just a moment ago, when she saw the nose, it wasn't this red. Pretend, continue pretending. Su Luo very disdainfully swept a glance at him and said, is His Highness Prince Jin still a child? You actually believe this stuff? Just blowing on it and it would heal? Really naive, just like a little kid. Wasn't he afraid that people would laugh at him? Sure enough, that circle of servants, each and every one of them had bowed their head with eyes lowered, their faces were red from restraining their laughter. With one sweep of His Highness Prince Jin's eyes, immediately, it was as if the hottest days of summer were covered with snow and frost. Their expressions all of a sudden became frozen stiff. Every one of their heads lowered in shame, an appearance of being stiff and not daring to move. They didn't even dare to breathe. Supreme dominance. Power was authority. Su Luo silently cursed in her heart, she sincerely sympathized with the servant standing on the side. To have to wait upon His Highness who was Satan-like, with temperamental and indeterminate gloomy mood swings. Weren't their toil way too hard? Unexpectedly, when Nangong Liuyan turned his head towards her, he looked lost with a pitiful expression. He accusingly looked at her. Painful, it really is very painful. Such a childish manner. Su Luo bit down on her teeth, she really wanted to shake off this pretending to be adorable His Highness Prince Jin. However, once her eyes met that pair of limpid, misty, and lovely pair of eyes, she was defeated in a moment. Okay. Help you blow on it, I'll help you blow on it. Su Luo distastefully cast him a glance, with one hand pulling his hand away from his nose. She stooped down, took a deep breath and blew on his nose. She perfunctorily blew on his nose 2 times, then with one hand, she pushed him away and bluntly stood up saying, is it okay now? You are not taking responsibility. Nangong Liuyan had an accusing expression while covering his nose. When he said this, his posture was like that of a spoiled child. How am I not being responsible? Su Luo had an expression full of misgivings. Nangong Liuyan really did immediately sit down, looking at Su Luo. Shouldn't you be cupping the other's face, speaking softly and comforting me? Afterwards, shouldn't you tenderly and softly blow on it? This kind of Nangong Liuyan really made her feel like wanting to weep but lacking the tears. Su Luo let out a loud yell, you really have too many requests. Nangong Liuyan's face had an innocent expression, half reclining on the chair made of red sandalwood. He glanced at Su Luo and leisurely said, the other stuff, I won't demand it from you. However, you should at least blow on it a few more times, right? This is the most basic thing and you weren't able to complete it. When he said this, he actually had an appearance of being somewhat wronged. Chapter 263, Prince Jin's Royal Manner, 14, the veins on Su Luo's forehead were about to explode. She tightly clenched her fists, and glared at him furiously. She simply gave up on talking sense into this evildoer. Why must it be me who does it? The last thing you lack at your residence are servants. In all likelihood, just one command from His Highness Prince Jin and an innumerable number of servants would crawl to wait upon him. Su Luo sent a glare his way while speaking the truth. Nangong Liuyun's serene and unperturbed gaze swept the circle of servants whose heads were bowed from embarrassment. Just a light, casual sweeping glance. However, as far as the surrounding servants were concerned, His Highness Prince Jin's faint glance immediately gave them the feeling of an icy autumn gale sweeping away the fallen leaves. It was harsh and desolate. "Highness, His Highness, we will first take our leave." The circle of servants all kneeled with respect and trepidation. Their entire body was trembling in fear and anxiety. Nangong Luyun had one hand raised to his forehead, and lightly hummed, seemingly in answer. "Hey, don't you guys leave so urgently." Su Luo watched helplessly. When these servants left, then wouldn't Nangong Luyun be even more intent on wanting a mile when given an inch? However, Su Luo's voice to these servants was like a sign pressuring them to continue. At the beginning they were still walking, when Su Luo spoke, then practically all of them ran. In a split second, all of them disappeared without a trace. Seeing this, Su Luo simply wanted to cry but had no tears. She said to Nangong Luyun with a dumbfounded expression, "Does every one of your servants know the martial arts move Ling Bo Wei Bu, 1? It was simply too fast." Fleeing for one's life at the critical juncture, their potential would naturally be unlimited. Nangong Luyun lightly snorted, and once again changed the subject. "Come here, beg for forgiveness for yourself." "Nangong Luyun, you better not push your luck." Su Luo stood determinedly at a distance and glared at him in displeasure. Nangong Luyun's eyes drooped down. After a long time, it once again silently lifted up to glance at Su Luo. Others say that having benefited from someone's small favors, it should be doubly repaid. Why don't you consider it as repaying a small favor? She couldn't bear his faint sigh and dejected manner. Su Luo conceded defeat and slowly walked to in front of him, softly asking, "In the end, what do you really want?" Actually, what he said was right. When she hid under his horse carriage, indeed, she really ought to thank him. If it weren't for him showing up just in time by chance, she wouldn't have escaped Lu Qingfeng's pursuit, because of the tracking imprint he had placed on her. Nangong Luyun raised his head to look at her. His tone had a touch of a spoiled child throwing a tantrum. "Tonight, you should stay and keep me company." This man was truly reaching for the mile when given an inch. He would seize such a small favor to coerce her. He had also made the use of coercion seem so righteous and proper. However, how could she agree to stay behind? This promise would represent her making a certain degree of concession. Her staying overnight at Prince Jin's royal manor, if it were to be spread out by other people, then how would they view this? What would people think about this? How could she get back her innocence? In the future, how could she righteously and confidently pursue her own happiness? Therefore, faced with his request, she didn't say a word. "Stay behind to keep me company," he repeated again. "This matter, I'm afraid, is not possible." Su Luo softly replied, her gaze steadily fixed on his. Nangong Luyun didn't speak. Suddenly, after quite a while, the corner of his mouth pulled slightly apart and he started to smile in a devilishly charming manner. "Foolish Luo Luo, you are simply too slow-witted. Without this king's consent, how could you leave this royal manor?" After all, his soft manner and humble air, pretending to be pitiful and cutely beseeching her just a moment ago, it was merely just one type of tactic. The thing he set his mind to and the person he was determined to have, he would never let go. "Nangong Luyun, you are shameless." Su Luo naturally knew of this point. It was not like she hadn't tried to go out. She simply could not exit the gate of even the Qin Palace section of the manor. She had been immediately blocked at the gate. Shameless, huh? This king could even be a little more shameless. Do you want to experience it? Nangong Luyun had a proud expression on his face, while smilingly watching her. 1. Ling Bo Wei Bu is a superior martial arts move from Jin Yong's books. It's a light body, Qin Gong, footwork that avoids all enemy attack. P.S. Jin Yong is one of the most famous writers of martial arts, and most of his books were made into kung fu movies or TV series more than once. Chapter 264, Prince Jin's Royal Manor, 15, Don't get ahead of yourself. Su Luo furiously glared at him. Obedient Luo, don't be angry. In fact, you have also thought that Lu Qingfeng has surely sent a countless number of people to hide by my manor's gate to wait for you. Little Luo, once you go out, you will walk into a trap. My family's little Luo wouldn't be that dumb, right? Nangong Luyun had both hands crossed in front of his chest, with a sinister smile on his face. If your Highness Prince Jin were to issue a few words, how could Lu Qingfeng dare not withdraw his people? Su Luo grinded her teeth and coldly responded. Nangong Luyun innocently shrugged his shoulders with his arms open and hands facing up, and he obstinately shook his head. Foolish Luo, one favor after another, you still haven't repaid my kindness yet. How could this king continue to do more favors for you? If there are too many favors, then you will have to repay them with your flesh. This wouldn't be fair to you. This man didn't seem to have any limit. Su Luo made a fist while being speechless. What you said is right, too many favors are indeed hard to pay back. Nangong Luyun gracefully nodded his head, replying as if it was only logical, yes, therefore tonight, you should first return some interest. Su Luo speechlessly asked, how do you want to be repaid? Nangong Luyun suddenly started to smile in a devilishly charming manner. His smile could enchant all living things. Obedient Luo, this I have to ask you. How much are you prepared to pay back? Repay only the interest? Repay the capital amount? Or pay back both the capital and interest together? Su Luo was still speechless. She never thought that his head would have so many tricky twists and turns. She glared directly at him. How to pay back the interest? How to pay back the capital? And also what methods should be used to repay both the capital and interest? Nangong Luyun's eyes drooped down halfway and leisurely said, there are many details to pay attention to. However, tonight, this king will explain it to you one at a time. You shouldn't be so impatient, we have plenty of time. Who was impatient? Su Luo swept him a very despising glance and said, your thinking had better be a bit purer. In fact, this sentence was full of many meanings. It also made her attitude very clear. Tonight, she really had to stay here. Without Nangong Luyun's order, she really couldn't leave Prince Jin's royal manor. Even if she was able to leave Prince Jin's royal manor, she still didn't know how dangerous it was outside of the manor. Only, tonight was doomed to not be peaceful. Su Luo had already been somewhat mentally prepared, but the final development in this matter had gone beyond her expectations. Night. The sky appeared as if draped in a black layer of light muslin. In the lonely sky hung a few remnant stars, giving off a dim and bleak luster. Su Luo came to her senses from her contemplation. Glancing at the color of the sky, she discovered it was pretty late. Where is my room? Su Luo asked with a frown after pulling a maid who was hurriedly passing by to a stop. Half of the night had already passed, and yet no one had come to inform her where she should sleep tonight. Su Luo's expression said she couldn't understand this. When that maid heard the question, her body immediately jumped and she was alarmed. At once, she kneeled down and begged for forgiveness. Young lady, this servant doesn't know. You should go and ask His Highness yourself. I beg you to spare this servant. Was her appearance that scary? Why was it that when the servant saw her, it was as if she had seen a ghost? Su Luo somewhat dumbfoundedly touched her own delicate and beautiful cheeks. This face ought to be quite pretty. Once she grew up a bit, she ought to be a complete, devastatingly beautiful little belle. However, the maid kneeling on the ground continuously begged for forgiveness. She was beseeching Su Luo to let her go. Su Luo was simply out of ideas and bluntly said, Okay, tell me where your family's highness is, I will go ask him myself. His Highness is at a bedroom in the Qin Palace courtyard. The maid very carefully said. Fine, you can go now. Su Luo waved her hand and sent the maid away. In Prince Jin's royal manor for a brief half-day period, Su Luo didn't discover anything else, but she found that the reverence of the servants here for His Highness Prince Jin came from the bottom of their hearts. Chapter 265, Romance in Prince Jin's Manor. 1. Each and every one of them kept quiet out of fear in front of Nangong Luyun. They were even afraid to breathe out loud, simply trembling and shivering as if having caught sight of Yama, the king of hell. Su Luo was somewhat bewildered, although Nangong Luyun, this person, despised following convention sometimes, and acted like a hooligan other times. Why would the servants be scared of him this much? Su Luo remained perplexed as she continued to ponder this while walking. Very soon, she arrived at his bedroom. Su Luo noiselessly pushed open the door and looked inside. Presently, Nangong Luyun had his hands behind his back and was standing quietly in front of the window that had been pushed open. His pair of black eyes was looking out at the horizon, which was sparsely populated with remnant stars. His gorgeous soft robe was made of golden silk embroidered with pretty and flirtatious flowers of North India. His jet-black, silky, soft hair flowed down, carrying a kind of refined, wild and rashness manner that was the ultimate in attractiveness. His face, which was slanted to the side, was perfection, like an ancient Greek sculpture of an exquisite god, flirtatious and threatening. Hearing a noise, he unhurriedly turned his head. A pair of black eyes full of smiles looked at Su Luo. His smile was as gorgeous and dazzling as the blooming cherry blossoms in March. At this time, Su Luo only felt her own heart skip a beat. A kind of unprecedented exotic feeling made her chest area closest to her heart become limp and numb. Her pulse started to speed up and was hard to control. Come here. Nangong Luyun gracefully crooked his finger towards Su Luo. Every movement of his was pronounced, respectable, and intense. Su Luo merely looked at him, not speaking, but also not moving. Nangong Luyun cast a bantering glance towards her, dilly-dallying. What, afraid? Su Luo raised an eyebrow, glaring at him. What's there to be afraid of? Why should I be afraid? Do you look very frightening? Nangong Luyun's body turned around and moved. In the blink of an eye, Su Luo had already landed in his embrace. He lowered his head and looked at her. His indolent and deep voice, in the tranquil night, had a thread of deep huskiness. Yeah, this King's Luo is the bravest. How could you be scared? While he was speaking, he used his slender finger to caress her fair and tender cheeks, which were like water. Speak properly, don't get fresh with me. Su Luo threw him an annoyed glance. Nangong Luyun's eyebrow rose slightly. His glance was deep, flirtatious and moving. We can talk on one hand while touching each other on the other hand, it doesn't hinder anything. Little Luo, what are you being so bashful about? Su Luo only felt that surrounding her body was a male smell that was distinctively his. The breath she inhaled into her lungs all had his smell. Her face was slightly red. She pushed him away with one shove. Her face became serious and firm as she said, Nangong Luyun, don't change the subject. I want to ask you, since you forced me to remain behind, where should I sleep tonight? A touch of doubt flashed through his beautiful eyes. Afterwards, as if it was right and expected, he said, Foolish Luo, do you really need to ask this question? Naturally, you would be sleeping here. Su Luo felt her breath being stifled in her throat, and her eyes started to narrow dangerously. She glared at Nangong Luyun, saying and emphasizing each word, What? Did you just say? Nangong Luyun fluidly and gracefully moved to pour 2 cups of amber-colored red wine. With his eyes drooping down, he leisurely swirled the wine. Nangong Luyun, clearly tell it to me. Su Luo was a little flustered and exasperated as she let out a snort. She was forced by circumstances to remain behind. However, this did not mean she would sleep in the same room with him. Nangong Liuyan's drooping eyebrow rose slightly. His serene and flowing eyes secretly stared at Su Luo. The corner of his mouth, little by little, stretched into a smile that was seductive and moving. It was also as noble as the gods. Humph. Not going to tell me clearly, huh? Then I will leave right now. Su Luo, panting with rage, turned around and was just about to leave. However, she had barely passed by Nangong Liuyan's side before her arm was pulled to a stop by him. Nangong Liuyan raised his head, his sexy throat moved, in one mouthful, he swallowed the amber-colored red wine. When he was drinking the wine, his pair of deep black eyes was continuously giving off a burning light that was motionlessly fixed on Su Luo. Chapter 266, Romance in Prince Jin's Manor, 2, at the corner of his bright red lips, a dark red droplet was rolling down. He immediately gave her the impression of being devilishly charming, alluring but also brutal, savage and bloodthirsty. He also gave off a sensation of a blood-sucking, noble vampire from the Middle Ages who was handsome, elegant and seductive. Nangong Liuyan in this state was handsome beyond compare, luring people to simply commit a major crime of passion. Let go. Meeting with a wolf-like, coarse and wild gaze that was fixed on her, Su Luo's heart was inevitably a little frenetic. Her body's natural instinct for danger made her want to turn around and flee. Trying to escape far away from his control. However, before she could shake off Nangong Liuyan, the opposing party took unfair advantage of her proximity and advanced. His arm was like an iron clamp, unyielding and powerful, firmly stopping her and holding on to her slender waist. A magnified, large handsome face appeared in front of her. His slightly narrowed phoenix eyes with hidden depths were like the undisturbed sea. Once again, wind appeared to give rise to large waves in them, emitting a disdain for the world that was overbearing and tyrannical. Nangong, this kind of meaningful expression would simply startle people's hearts. Su Luo had spoken just 2 words, before he bent down and seized the corner of her soft lips. Now he was like a bold and powerful cheetah from an African prairie, erotic, coarse and wild. He fiercely nibbled and bit at his own most beloved prey. He transferred a full mouthful of red wine to Su Luo. The sudden assault of the wine choked her until she coughed. She started to struggle as if her life depended on it. Nangong Liuyan's strong and powerful large palm suddenly imprisoned her into his chest. The other large palm was holding the back of her head. From top to bottom confining her in place, making Su Luo's struggle and resistance to no avail. The feverish kiss that was earth-shattering, was also tyrannical and emphatic, not allowing refusal. Their lips and tongues intertwined, charming, romantic and natural. His kiss was incomparably overbearing, strategically besieging the inside of her mouth, pressing on her until there was nowhere to flee to. She had no choice and was forced to respond to his passion. The surroundings were silent and quiet. An ambiguous aura burst forth into the sky of the desolate night. The faint, warm, summer grass smell that was distinctively from Nangong Liuyan's body drew near her nose, carrying an opium-like, sinfully strong allure, making her entire spirit tremble. At this time, Su Luo's mind was completely blank, she forgot to resist and lost all rational thoughts. She lost herself and practically lost all control, becoming intoxicated with the tender, homey feeling he wove. She sank deeply into it and could not free herself. Nangong Liuyan's coarse, wild and overbearing gale-like stormy kiss began to calm down. It softened and became a breeze-like drizzle that was soft and silky. It was also as gentle as the touch of a dragonfly skimming the water's surface. As if a long, long time had passed. Only then did Nangong Liuyan reluctantly leave the corner of her lips that made people want to commit a crime. Only his pair of large hands was still tenderly cupping her very small cheeks. He was earnestly and carefully staring at her. That pair of demonically charming, red-rimmed phoenix eyes blurred in passing for a split second. The surrounding were quiet. There was only the sound of their slightly chaotic gasps for breath. The bright moonlight cast a disproportionate shadow on the ground. The wind outside the window blew gently. Now, inside the room, there was a strange, flirtatious feeling of the calm before the storm. No one was willing to break this quiet mood. "You went too far," Su Luo angrily uttered in rebuke with a displeased expression of having been violated. Originally, she thought her voice would sound wrathful, but the matter that made it even more difficult for her indignation was that her voice now sounded soft, weak and lacking strength. It was hoarse, deep and low, as if trapped by lust and hard to extricate from herself. Rather than sounding like an angry rebuke, it sounded more like wanting to resist while still welcoming the blame. This kind of tone made even Su Luo herself unable to continue listening to it. She turned her head away and gradually adjusted her disordered mood. The corner of Nangong Liuyan's mouth lifted into a smile. He unhurriedly tidied up her conspicuously messy hair. His languid movement seemed a little blurred. "Silly Luo Luo, are you this fond of this king kissing you?" Su Luo's previous breath choked back in her throat. Chapter 267, Romance in Prince Jin's Manor, 3, This was what you call her liking it? It was clearly forced on her, okay? Su Luo's eyes were as cold as the water in autumn, and full of indignation. She grinded out everything word by word. "Nangong Luyun, you better not be flaunting it just because you got away with taking cheap advantage of me. Having already gotten away with taking cheap advantage and being secretly happy was enough, but to actually come and flaunt it, this would just provoke more fury." Nangong Liuyan's strong and powerful arms took the opportunity to encircle her, drawing Su Luo in front of him into his embrace. He had a pleased with himself expression and his tone was smooth. "You still aren't willing to admit it? Just a moment ago, who was it that clung to this king and wouldn't let go? Such a bashful little thing." Su Luo's face was scarlet from holding back. Her fist smashed towards Nangong Liuyan's chest with a fiendish and monstrous expression. "If you are seeking death, just say so. Don't be so subtle." Nangong Liuyan's pitch-black eyes flashed with a trace of being pleased with himself. He hugged Su Luo even tighter to him, pasting her entire body to his and not leaving a tiny seam in between them. He calmly and composedly said, "My family's Luo Luo is the one who would hate to let go. If this king dies, then you must accompany this king to die together." Su Luo coldly snorted, "Such beautiful wishful thinking, who would accompany you to die together? In any case, that person is not me." Being hard-mouthed, Nangong Luyun leaned over and kissed the edge of her soft lips. Inch by inch, he lightly, gently and softly kissed her. His actions were exquisite and tender, compared to before, which was the kind of plundering like the blast of torrential rain. They were completely different methods. Su Luo instinctively wanted to dodge, but anything that Nangong Luyun wanted to do, how could he leave it unfinished? One could only see Nangong Luyun placing both of her hands behind her back. His other hand cupped the curvature of her fair, soft and lovable chin. He greedily sampled the smell that belonged only to her. There was nowhere for Su Luo to escape to. In all fairness, her heart considered his smell to be amazing. That kind of smell which was like the warm spring grass when cherry blossoms bloomed in March could intoxicate a person. Dazzling, giddying and swoon-worthy, twisting and turning to nibble away deep into her bone with its ecstasy. It was as if just by touching, it would taint you and make you an addict, never willing to stop. Slowly, he let her go, caressing her prominently outlined, ravished red lips. The corner of Nangong Liuyan's mouth curved up in satisfaction. His phoenix eyes were content and lazy like a leopard's. This is the first time this king has the benefit of enjoying. Afterwards, only this king will be able to enjoy it. Memorized it yet? Seeing the satisfied Nangong Luyun with his phoenix eyes slightly closed, a furious feeling of having choked back being wronged for a long time, all of a sudden streaked across Su Luo's heart. Then she sneered and said, "Nangong Luyun, you are rather too naive, okay?" Su Luo pointed to her own ravished red lips which started to curve into an enigmatic grim smile. "This here, how could it have been enjoyed only by you alone? Once these words were out, the tranquil atmosphere was as if cold frost had descended. In a flash, the temperature dropped to as low as an icehouse's. The air in the atmosphere immediately condensed into ice and frost. It was bone-chillingly cold. Nangong Liuyan's deep and distant eyes momentarily squeezed out icy and strict rays of light. His incomparably handsome face became clouded and shrouded in a layer of icy frost. From head to toe, he was producing and scattering a terrifying aura. His serene expression now embodied a scathing aura of death, savage and reeking of blood. He ruthlessly and very darkly glared at Su Luo. That pair of eyes that was brimming with cockiness just a moment ago now burst forth with a chilliness that would stop a person's beating heart. In this split second, a feeling of vexation flashed through Su Luo's heart. However, she really never expected that Nangong Liuyan's reaction would be this large. It was merely a kiss, he would actually care about it this much? If he knew about her joining the romantic dating scene in the modern era and playing according to those rules, wouldn't he have gone insane from fury? Su Luo's heart was a little uneasy. Suddenly, she felt that she lacked some confidence. However, what was she to be afraid of? Also, who was she to him? Why should she allow him to control her every move? Thinking up to here, Su Luo became full of confidence. She bravely confronted Nangong Liuyan's murderous-looking gaze. Chapter 268, Romance in Prince Jin's Manor. 4. At this moment, both were sharply opposing each other, with neither prepared to give an inch. They were both fiercely glaring at each other, neither was willing to be outdone. Who else? Nangong Liuyan's phoenix eyes were half-narrowed dangerously. His eyes had a kind of chilliness that would stop a person's heart from beating. A pair of bloodthirsty pupils firmly stared at Su Luo, like a berserk beast. Su Luo's heart was a little lacking in confidence, but her face hardly showed any weakness. She bravely retorted back, "Why would it concern you? Is it something you can control?" This sentence was as if she had suddenly poked at a hornet's nest. Nangong Liuyan's eyes were like a sharp blade curved from a millennium-old block of ice, ruthlessly launched at Su Luo. His furious thoughts grew without restraint, stressing each word. He said, "You, say that again one more time." Su Luo had a little guilty conscience, but having arrived at this juncture, whoever showed weakness would stand on the losing side. Therefore, Su Luo bravely lifted up her chin. She unblinkingly returned his glare with a glare. "My affairs have nothing to do with you. Before it was unrelated to you, now it's unrelated to you, and in the future, it will be even more unrelated to you." Nangong Liuyan's darkening face was about to explode like a tempest at any moment, and his eyes flashed with a bloodthirsty frost. Now, the moon in the sky was hidden among a thick layer of clouds. All of a sudden, a flash of lightning streaked past. Following close behind, the rumbling of thunder started to sound in the silence of the night. The weather at this moment suddenly changed. A gale-like wind bellowed and heavy torrential rain poured down. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. The sky that was clear suddenly became cloudy, shining upon the side of Nangong Liuyan's matchless handsome face. It made him look even more malicious and sinister. He looked so cruel that people wouldn't dare to look straight at him. Suddenly, his lanky and jade-like fingers grabbed and pinched Su Luo's throat. A kind of panic-stricken feeling of having her breathing cut off started to spread through Su Luo's heart. However, Su Luo did not beg for forgiveness. She merely tried to break open his hand through sheer obstinacy, using all her strength. However, the level disparity was that obvious. The contrast in strength could be seen at a glance. How could the second-ranked Su Luo be the seventh-ranked Nangong Liuyan's opponent? Still even more so, the Nangong Liuyan right now had sunk straight into a rash, ruthless state of mind. He was even more unwilling to back off and let go. No matter how hard Su Luo tried, she could not pry apart his hand. On the contrary, because of Su Luo's stubborn resistance, Nangong Liuyan's strong and powerful 5 fingers were like an iron hook. the more she struggled, the tighter it became. It got so tight that it could almost cut off Su Luo's neck. Her throat continued to ache as if it was burning, she couldn't breathe in fresh air and her entire face swelled, turning red. She painfully gasped for breath but could not inhale even a thread of air. It was completely cut off by Nangong Liuyun's pair of large hands. Her consciousness became more and more fuzzy. Su Luo felt that her entire body was light as a feather, floating to and fro as if her soul was about to fly away. Just when Su Luo's vision became fuzzy, a thick shadow leaned over and bent down. With an unparalleled gesture, he strongly and overbearingly occupied her red lips. A mouthful of fresh air, like strands of silk, slid into her suffocated lungs. The delirious Su Luo clutched at the final straw that could save her life. Why would she be willing to let go? He strongly, wantonly moved around in her mouth. She indifferently replenished the air essential for her survival from his mouth. She allowed him to come and go freely, no matter what, she could not oppose him. The two of them hugged tightly close together, each taking what he or she needed. It was only after a long, long time, did that pair of large, lanky hands tightly pinching at her throat finally start to shift away. Only, his expression was still as bloodthirsty as before. It was merciless and icy cold to the bone. Luo Luo, be obedient from now on, you mustn't be this naughty again. Nangong Luyun slowly caressed Su Luo's red, swelling lips that had been sucked on. The corner of his mouth, little by little, hooked into a devilishly charming and alluring smile. However, that smile never reached his eyes were as ice-cold as before, so inhumane. This man was simply too terrible. Chapter 269, Romance in Prince Jin's Manor, 5, Su Luo, with trepidation and lingering fear, looked at this man, and unable to suppress it, she took a step back. This step was like stepping away from the abyss. The smile at the corner of Nangong Liuyun's mouth became increasingly gorgeous. He caressed Su Luo's pair of pink tender cheeks, as if explaining something for Su Luo to listen to, but also seemed to be speaking to himself. If I snap off the wings of a phoenix, would it still be a phoenix? His voice was like a breeze and gentle rain, playing down everything. However, when it reached Su Luo's ears, she felt fearful and alarmed in the face of disaster. She would rather see him vent in violent fury and use a murderous gaze full of ice to look at her, than see him like this with a smiling expression that never reached his eyes, trying to fool himself with words. This kind of him made her alarmed and scared. She cannot provoke him further, she really must not. Su Luo silently looked at him, not saying a word. Nangong Luyun smiled, his smile was as tender and gentle as water. He briskly pulled on Su Luo's hand, leading her to walk towards the bed. He lovingly and indulgently rubbed the black hair on her head. The time is late, Luo girl, you should keep this king company in the same bed. After saying this, he didn't allow her to refuse and put her on top of the bed. Soon after, he turned himself over and also got onto the bed. His movements were gentle, but also carried a strong force that would not tolerate resistance. Su Luo attempted to refuse, but discovered she was simply unable to decline. This temperamental man with huge mood swings. Just a moment ago, he was violently raging as if he wanted to kill everyone in the entire world. Now, his expression was once again all smiles, she really didn't know which was the real him. Su Luo's heart let out a sigh of aggravation. Since she was unable to refuse, then she had no other choice but to accept. After all, it was not like anything would really happen in bed. It was merely sleeping on the same bed and nothing more. Su Luo simply lay flat on top of the embroidered quilt. Afterwards, she rolled around and wrapped herself in the quilt like a plump, cocooned silkworm. Then she rolled on the bed towards the wall and inclined towards the side. She faced inside, with her body stretched out straight. Su Luo's actions were done smoothly, without a half-second pause. In a blink of an eye, she had completed her movements. Nangong Luyun was simply dumbstruck as he watched this scene in front of him. A long time later, he finally leaned over her body and started to chuckle. The more he chucked, the less he was able to repress his laughter. Finally, he was laughing so hard that tears almost came out. His little Luo Luo was simply too cute. She would go as far as bundling herself up to resemble a cocoon silkworm. Su Luo irritatedly rolled to a 90-degree angle to be face to face with him as she glared at him. The night is getting darker, why haven't you quickly lie down to sleep? What are you laughing at? However, since Nangong Luyun could laugh out loud, Su Luo's could relax her highly alerted heart from before. Compared to the sinister Nangong Luyun from just a moment ago, who was like an Azura that had walked out of hell, the him right now, although he was abominable, seemed much cuter. Nangong Luyun spoilingly and lovingly rubbed her little head. His tone appeared to be careless. Little girl, you think that being bundled like this, then this king would be unable to deal with you? If he really wanted to deal with her, why would he regard this very small embroidered quilt as a hindrance? In the time it took him to lift his hand, he would have torn it. Su Luo's heart went thump. She becomes somewhat afraid of the consequences. She shakingly and falteringly extended out her little head and sent a quick glare at Nangong Luyun. This asshole wouldn't really want to do something right. Probably because there was something in her expression, or it could have been that the manner she extended out her head was too ridiculous. The laughter in Nangong Luyun's eyes became even stronger. He stretched out his hand, those slender fingers flicked once on top of her head. Both of Su Luo's hands were wrapped in the quilt and could not rub her head that hurt from his flick that could explode a chestnut. She could only use her watery eyes to glare at him accusingly. The high and mighty prince unexpectedly would be this stingy. Didn't I only use one of your quilts? Way too stingy. This girl's ability to avoid the important details and dwell on the minor ones was really not a little skilled. Nangong Luyun took pity on her and his slender fingers rubbed her forehead. His finger seized the opportunity to lightly brush her lips. Su Luo was stumped for words. Chapter 270, Romance in Prince Jin's Manor, 6. His finger was warm and soft as jade, it lightly brushed by like a feather. It was numbing and tingling, making her itch from the soles of her feet to her heart. Nangong Luyun saw her reaction, and the smile in his eyes became even more concentrated. He lowered his head, with his lips almost touching hers. Su Luo wanted to move back, but discovered to her sorrow that her entire body was bundled in the quilt, unable to move. The hot air that Nangong Luyun breathed out, landed onto her face, almost as if it was touching her lips. He said in a low voice, "A dead duck's mouth is hard, here, apart from this king, no one had ever touched it before." Ultimately, he still lightly pecked at Su Luo's soft, red lips. Once again, he took advantage of her. Su Luo glowered at him. Nangong Luyun raised an eyebrow in a philander manner, "Just this, and you are impatient? Now, it is still the prelude, tonight, the night is very long." While pinching both of Su Luo's pink tender cheeks, his smile became even wider. Although his tone seemed careless, the idea it conveyed was nakedly dripping with blood. Hearing this, Su Luo only felt her hair stand on ends, with her back going cold. This man with evil taste. He would torment her in this way and had actually told her that this was merely a prelude and nothing more. Nothing more, then what would follow this? Su Luo wished that tonight would be over in a hurry, so change would come with breakfast in the daytime. Just as the saying went, whatever you owe, you must not owe a debt for a favor, because this demanded repayment in flesh. No wonder when the servants in Prince Jin's manor saw him, it was as if every one of them had seen a ghost. They were so afraid that they were terrified. They were not only afraid of him, but also of his influence and strength, right? This man, by birth alone, had the capital to make people despair and become panic-stricken. Tonight, what would he do? Instinctively, Su Luo was a little scared. She wanted to turn around and shrink back into her quilt, like a turtle withdrawing back into its shell. However, Nangong Luyun was a step ahead of her, she also didn't know how he moved. He merely grabbed the corner of the quilt firmly and casually tugged, then Su Luo's entire body was like a meatball, automatically rolling into his embrace. Without waiting for Su Luo to turn and leave, Nangong Luyun had already lowered his body and seized her lips. His breath assaulted her senses like a dense mist around her, teasing her heart. Once Su Luo became aware, she used all her strength to push him away. What she never expected was that this push actually made him reel away. When did Nangong Luyun become this weak? The sound of thunder erupted outside the window. Pea-sized droplets of rain came down in buckets. The sound of pouring rain echoed violently during this period. Lightning flashed, thunder rolled, and the rumbling sounds were never-ending. The lightning that flashed by, in an instant, lit up the room like daytime. It shone upon Nangong Luyun's face, and Su Luo saw that his eyebrows and forehead were slightly knotted. Su Luo watched him, thought about it, and her entire body curled back into the embroidered quilt. She withdrew her entire body into the quilt, only leaving her pair of clear, black and large eyes unblinkingly watching Nangong Luyun. This asshole cared most about his reputation, having been pushed away by her like this, perhaps he would fly into a rage out of humiliation. Yet, outside Su Luo's expectations, Nangong Luyun not only didn't once again ruthlessly pounce on her, he slowly turned over and instead half reclined down on the side. He pulled up the quilt to cover himself with both hands behind his back, and lazily cast her a quick glance. "Do you feel that you could escape me tonight?" Su Luo pursed her lips, as if thinking about it while looking at him. Something was wrong. This asshole had always been the action type, actions were more powerful than words. At this moment, he was actually speaking arrogantly. Although actions-wise, he had clearly already given up. What was going on? Su Luo, who examined things down to the smallest details, could make out something doubtful at once. When the lightning flashed by, Su Luo's gaze was looking at Nangong Luyun's complexion. She clearly saw that Nangong Luyun's brows were wrinkled ferociously, appearing as if he was suffering a lot of pain. But he hasn't been injured. Su Luo secretly felt this was strange in her heart. Chapter 271, Romance in Prince Jin's Manor, 7. Nangong Luyun saw Su Luo looking at him, lifting his eyebrows. He devilishly charmingly smirked at her. He lazily said, "Want the woman to take the lead? Okay, this king will give you a chance, come." Shameless. A man without boundaries. Would not taking advantage of her when speaking kill him? Su Luo fiercely glared at him, but the Nangong Luyun right now suddenly blinked his eyes, his forehead was coated in a layer sweat. "Nangong, are you?" Su Luo felt that something was fishy. She unrolled the quilt and shifted towards where Nangong Luyun was. Nangong Luyun waved his hand, and his smile widened. He downplayed everything, saying, "It's nothing, just a little old illness. Once it's here, it will be sore for a short while." Old illness? Making Nangong Luyun call it an old illness, what kind of old wound would it be? When the time comes it would hurt for a while. When the time comes, don't tell me, after a period of time, it would start hurting, something that comes chronically? A touch of doting feeling flashed through Su Luo's heart. She could not imagine the kind of pain that could change Nangong Luyun's complexion. How painful must it be? Momentarily, she was at a complete loss, she wasn't sure what she should do that would be good. Nangong Luyun was on his side, being supported on one hand. He smilingly watched her. However, Su Luo could clearly see the cold sweat on his forehead rushing out to form droplets. His chest and back were both soaked through with cold sweat. He smiled just like in the past, but the smile felt kind of lifeless. Su Luo wanted to ask him if he had painkiller drugs or something similar, but on second thought, even with Nangong Luyun's strength, if he was still unable to restrain the pain, then what was the use of painkillers? Nangong Luyun suddenly shut his eyes, he turned around and pulled the quilt to cover himself. Enough, it's getting late. If you don't want to sleep here, then go out and look for Ling Feng. He will arrange everything well for you. His tone sounded somewhat rushed, as if enduring something silently. He used the quilt to cover his entire person, so his voice sounded muffled. Su Luo was unable to see his expression clearly, but seeing his curled-up body, with his back arched and the quilt appearing to be shaking, it seemed as if it was very painful. Su Luo had a distracted and amazed expression, her heart had a fit of unrest. In the end, what was wrong with Nangong Luoyun? Such a strong, overbearing and insufferably arrogant man, how could he suffer so much pain until he was like this? Moreover, seeing him like this, it was as if this old illness had always caused him complications, flaring up periodically. Su Luo hadn't left since the beginning. She sat up with both hands linked together, holding her knees. Her face was slanted and was watching Nangong Luoyun all along. Nangong Luoyun sank into a deep sleep, the quilt that covered his face slid to the side. It revealed that handsome, sweat-covered, pale face. Outside, the gale storm erupted. In this kind of weather, if the sweat was not wiped dry, it was very easy to catch a cold. Su Luo thought about it, climbed down the bed, and walked out quietly on tiptoe. Outside the door, there was always servants standing there, waiting. Under Su Luo's instructions, a basin of hot water was very quickly fetched, in addition to a folded, snow-white, embroidered towel. It will be fine, I will go in by myself. You people continue to keep watch here. With one short sentence, Su Luo dismissed the servants. She personally carried the basin of hot water into the room. Nangong Luoyun, this kind of strong-minded man, certainly wouldn't want others to see this weak side of himself. Su Luo set the jade basin on top of the table, wrung the towel dry, and gently wiped clean Nangong Luoyun's face that was covered in sweat. Nangong Luoyun's brows were pinched tightly, and his complexion was terrifyingly pale. Even though before, she was itching to swat him dead, now seeing him like this, a trace of care and concern streaked across Su Luo's heart. Her finger involuntarily stroked his face, gently sliding towards the space between his eyebrows. He seemed to have relaxed a little. Doing something within her abilities for him, Su Luo felt very happy. Chapter 272, Romance in Prince Jin's Manor, 8. However, there wasn't enough time for her to be happy before her hands were grabbed by the him who was sleeping. He pulled her to him. Even though he was still in pain and still fast asleep, his strength was as astonishingly great as before. Su Luo simply had no time to react, before her entire body had already fallen into his embrace. She was heavily pressed on top of his body. Nangong Luoyun gave a muffled groan as she knocked into him, but he once again firmly hugged her to him. He then turned over and went back into a deep sleep. This time, Nangong Luoyun merely hugged her, holding her close, and didn't make any other movements. His arms were strong and powerful, as hard as iron clamps. Several times, Su Luo wanted to pry open his fingers but her efforts were to no avail. She was completely unable to move him even the slightest bit. Nangong Luoyun seemed to be submerged in a deep sleep. His breathing was long and continuous, only his eyebrows were still slightly pinched. Su Luo stopped struggling, a trace of a tender sentiment that she herself wasn't aware of flashed through the gaze she used to look at him. This man, suffering so much pain like this and still being able to sleep, was very rare. How could she have the heart to startle him awake with noise? Su Luo pulled up the quilt and wrapped it around him completely. Afterwards, in his embrace, she found a comfortable position and raised her head to look at his face. Long, thick eyelashes, handsome straight nose, thin red lips, and his facial features were exquisite. He was like a masterpiece sculpture delicately carved by a grandmaster-level sculptor. He was so handsome, it was beyond compare. Even though he was asleep as before, it was peaceful one now. His forehead successfully nodded into the Chinese character for river. Recalling his incomparable strength, eminence, an unapproachable identity and status, the place nearest to Su Luo's heart would flash with a trace of cherishing affection. Suddenly, a divine light flashed through Su Luo's mind. She suddenly remembered that she had forgotten a very important thing. Still remember that time when the little divine dragon looked at her, not wanting to let go, and was innocently deceived by her to be by her side? That's right, the celestial spirit water. Since the celestial spirit water had such a huge attractiveness for the little divine dragon, then it was sufficient to illustrate that top-of-the-line treasure. Only, she didn't know if it would be helpful in treating Nangong Liuyan's pain. However, his situation couldn't be worse than what it was right now. Su Luo took out a very small cup of celestial spirit water from her space. She held it very carefully, then she whispered in a very, very soft voice, "Nangong, wake up." Ah! Nangong Liuyan hugged her tightly, sleepily letting out a sound of agreement. Su Luo, once again, very, very carefully pushed him, "Come, drink a little water. Maybe it will make you a little more comfortable." Nangong Liuyan, in a state of half asleep and half awake, cutely and obediently opened his mouth. Su Luo carefully fed him half of the little cup of celestial spirit water for him to drink. Su Luo didn't dare to give him too much at once. She was afraid something would go wrong. After drinking all the water, Nangong Liuyan once again went back into deep sleep. Only, he was still hugging Su Luo as before, not letting go. Su Luo used her sleeves to gently wipe away the water stain at the corner of his mouth a few times. Again, she carefully observed his complexion. Didn't know how much time had passed, but his pinched eyebrows finally started to smooth out. Suddenly, his expression didn't seem to be in that much pain anymore. Seeing this, Su Luo was very happy. She single-handedly supported her chin and was all smiles as she looked at him. Outside, the rain came down increasingly heavier. The thunder rumbled continuously. In this man's embrace, Su Luo unconsciously fell into a deep sleep. This sleep, Su Luo slept very heavily. By the time she woke up, it was already late morning. Opening her eyes, she calmly looked at the ceiling. Last night's memories rose like the tide and rushed out. Nangong's teasing, Nangong's fury, Nangong's pain, one scene after another came thick and fast, stuffing her sober head full almost to the point of bursting. The last memory was of his smoothed-out handsome face. Su Luo suddenly sat up. When she turned her head to look, the bed already didn't have that man's silhouette. Chapter 273, Romance in Prince Jin's Manor, 9. This man was born into high status, and his martial arts cultivation was unparalleled. His power almost overflowed into the heavens, while his entire body was an enigma. This made people puzzled and also gave birth to a sense of curiosity in their hearts. Su Luo stretched lazily. She dilly-dallied for a good while before getting up to leave the bed. She asked a servant, and found out Nangong Liuyan had indeed left very early this morning. He had only made it clear that she should obediently stay inside the manor. He had left first thing in the morning. Don't know if his body was still in pain or not, Su Luo thought while eating breakfast. After finishing breakfast, Ling Feng automatically appeared in front of her. Ling Feng saw Su Luo, his mouth lifted a little. He shot her a glance that was neither cold nor hot. He held his sword and silently stood at the side. Ling Feng never expected that the boy servant from yesterday, after washing clean, was actually Su Luo. Now, he was somewhat speechlessly looking at the sky. He was just saying that that secretive little boy servant was giving him an odd feeling. So, as it turned out, his gut feeling wasn't mistaken. Where did Nangong go? When will he return? Su Luo turned sideways while walking to ask Ling Feng. His Highness's whereabouts have always been kept secret. It's better that Miss Su doesn't ask. Even asking was a waste of time, the normally indifferent Ling Feng added this sentence in his heart. Su Luo was just about to roll her eyes when Ling Feng once again added another sentence in a timely manner. His Highness said, if the fourth Miss Su woke up in the morning and missed him urgently, might as well take her to the Western Grove courtyard to sit around a while. That courtyard has His Highness's portraits. A breath was stifled in Su Luo's throat. This Nangong Lu Yun. Who missed him? She was merely asking casually without thinking about it. Su Luo unhappily glared at Ling Feng, such a conceited and arrogant guy. He really think he is a peacock, spreading his tail, bewitching everyone. And also to miss him urgently, I truly have nothing to say to that, not going. Ling Feng's mouth rose a little, in the end he did not respond. Able to assess His Highness this way without endangering their life, there was only this person in front of his eyes, that didn't even know or appreciated it, the fourth Miss Su. Ling Feng's expression remained unperturbed. Since Miss Su won't go to the study, then you should deal with these account books. Ling Feng waved his hand. Immediately, a row of servants approached in a line. Every one of them had both hands holding very thick accounting books that were piled up so high, it was blocking their line of sight. Their footsteps were shaky and swaying, it looked as if it was very dangerous. Su Luo looked at those account books, then lifted her eyes to look at Ling Feng with suspicion, opened her mouth and stammered, what do you mean deal with these account books? Speak human language. Both of Ling Feng's hand was holding onto his sword, his indifferent face was calm as he de-emphasized what he said. His Highness made clear, these things are all matters his future princess must do. Since you now have nothing to do, then just deal with all of this. Su Luo smiled a smile that was not quite a smile, and while casting him a glance, she unhurriedly said, you also said that these things are matters the future princess must handle. Why should this miss look after it? I'm not going to meddle in affairs that are not part of my position. Ling Feng's face that always seemed to have nerve paralysis was now hooked into a rare, faint smile. Towards the servants holding the accounts books swaying left and right, he coldly snorted, saying, before His Highness left, what he instructed, do you still remember? A row of 6 servants all said in unison, we remember His Highness said that Miss Su is already His Highness's woman. She is the future Princess Jean, her position is guaranteed and should get sincere treatment in this house. Ling Feng satisfiedly nodded his head. His gaze landed on Su Luo's face, light as a feather. He merely raised an eyebrow and did not speak. A breath seemed to be stifled in Su Luo's chest. That guy who ruined her reputation. Why say she was already his woman? Clearly they hadn't done anything okay. Fancy that last night, she was still worried about his illness, so extremely worried that even in the middle of the night, she still couldn't sleep. Later, she even took out celestial spirit water for him to drink. Was this how he repaid her? Chapter 274, Romance in Prince Jin's Manor, 10, Princess, these account books, there were many account books, it was very heavy, and the 6 servants carrying them were panting. Their hands and foot swung to and fro, but without Su Luo's orders, they simply wouldn't dare to put down these account books. Su Luo snorted heavily, what princess? Don't just shout out something erroneously. Don't you know it will ruin a person's innocence? Yes, without His Highness's command, we wouldn't dare to call out inappropriate names. The 6 servants replied in unison, however, Imperial Concubine Princess, these account books, Su Luo simply had nothing more to say. They had just agreed to not shout out titles erroneously. What did these mouths call her again? Move all of these account books out, who likes to look at them, then let them look at it. In any case, I won't look at them. Su Luo impatiently waved her hand, it was not like she was Princess Jean. Why should she become a stand-in and help him take care of the miscellaneous stuff in the manor? The 6 servants' gaze simultaneously looked at Ling Feng. Ling Feng waved his hand, indicating that they should leave. The 6 servants uniformly bowed and said to Su Luo in unison, we solemnly comply with Princess's orders. Us servants ask to be excused. Su Luo was about to scowl at them. Without waiting for her to flare up, the 6 servants, carrying the account books which were half a person in height, quickly slipped away. Where was that trembling and swaying that they had before, a feeling as if they were frail and about to fall over any second? Su Luo inevitably was dumbfounded. This Prince Jin's royal manner, every single one of the servants all had practiced the martial arts move Ling Bo Wei Bu, right? How could their kung fu skill at running for their life be this powerful? Princess, Ling Feng said one sentence and was interrupted by Su Luo's wave of a hand. Su Luo snappily glared at him. What? Even you have come to make fun of me? Wouldn't dare. Even though Ling Feng claimed that he wouldn't dare, his indifferent expression still didn't have a trace of humility that a bodyguard ought to have. Su Luo's eyebrow rose slightly, she smiled faintly while casting Ling Feng a quick glance. She calmly said with a slight anticipation, "That's right, Ling Feng, do you still remember the last time we made a bet?" She did not believe that even this wouldn't scare Ling Feng into leaving. Sure enough, Ling Feng's expression immediately changed. He anxiously looked at Su Luo, saying, "The 4th Miss Su should play nicely in this manner." All of a sudden, I remembered before His Highness left, he had instructed me to handle a few things that were urgent. Thus, I asked to be excused first. Hey, the last time's bet was about. Su Luo hadn't finished speaking before Ling Feng's figure had already disappeared from inside the room. His speed was as fast as lightning, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Seeing Ling Feng's scared and anxious rear view fleeing, Su Luo let out a sound of laughter. Last time, because they had urgently needed green-colored crystal stones to save Nangong Luyun, in a moment of desperation, Ling Feng had made a bet with Su Luo. If she could collect all 50 or equivalent green-colored crystal stones, then Ling Feng would go and become her personal bodyguard. The result was that she naturally won the bet. However, Ling Feng, this asshole, seemed as if he had completely forgotten about this bet. His face was as taut as before and continued to ignore paying this bet, coming and going freely. The people inside the room had all fled, leaving only Su Luo behind, by herself. Here was the inside of Nangong Liuyun's study. Normally, other people were not allowed to enter. Only Su Luo was not subjected to this restriction. On top of the bookshelf were rows and rows of books. Su Luo, who was deeply bored, picked up a book in passing. She swept a glance at the cover and it was actually Elementary Apothecary book. In a split second, Su Luo's eyes suddenly shone brightly. She still remembered that before, inside Elder Zihua's cave dwelling, she obtained that book that all the apothecaries in the world dreamed of finding, the obscure pill recipes. That obscure pill recipes was Elder Zihua's personal work. It recorded his lifetime's knowledge and experience in refining pills from recipes. Inside, it also contained an appendix with primeval pill recipes that had already been lost in this era. It was a pity that although obscure pill recipes was great, yet, it ended up in Su Luo's hands. During that time, Elder Zihua was the continent's only Grandmaster level apothecary. His level was so high that people could only look up with admiration, worship and deep reverence, making it hard for people to forget this predecessor. Chapter 275, Romance in Prince Jin's Manor, 11. The obscure pill recipes left by Elder Zihua included his lifetime worth of studies, but because he was too great, it was to the extent that the book he left behind was very abstruse. At the very least, she needed to be an intermediate apothecary to be able to understand a little of what was written. Not to mention, Su Luo was a novice who hadn't even set foot into the threshold of an apothecary. Her right now possessed a mountain of treasures, but no matter what, she couldn't find the key to enter it. This kind of taste like that of a castle in the air was really difficult to bear. However, now this elementary apothecary book right in front of her just so happened to be able to resolve the predicament that Su Luo was faced with. Recalling Nangong Luyun suffering from that kind of pain last night, Su Luo's heart suddenly had a notion. If she could raise her apothecary level, maybe she could cure Nangong Liuyan's old illness. Having thought of things up to here, Su Luo, with single-minded devotion, started to thumb through that elementary apothecary book. This type of basic book paid more attention to explaining the theory and analyzing the apothecary system. Su Luo had always been smart with practically a photographic memory, and adding her single-minded devotion on top of that, time passed in a flash while she was studying. When Su Luo rubbed her tired and dry eyes while standing up to stretch, she discovered a man was standing at the doorway. Today's Nangong Liuyan was dressed in a black brocade robe, his figure was tall and lean. His phoenix eyes were narrowed slightly, dark as ink and deep as a bottomless pool. It was domineering, and at the same time, full of a noble aura. His thin lips were dark red, moist and hooked into a demonically charming smile like a scarlet cluster of amaryllis, so alluring and enticing. He stood unmoving at the doorway, the sunlight shone onto his whole body, making it radiate a faint halo. Even though he was just silently watching her, part of his inherent arrogance, nobility and domineering aura basically made it impossible for people to ignore his existence. He merely watched Su Luo with an amiable manner that was light as clouds and gentle as the wind. However, he still gave off a kind of indiscernible oppressive feeling. Encountering that pair of charming, beautiful eyes that hypnotized all living things, Su Luo found that her own heart was throbbing uncontrollably. Evildoer, he indeed deserved to be called an evildoer. Just by appearing, he would capture all the brilliance from the surroundings, as if all the splendor would gather on his body at this time. Nangong Liuyan, dressed in an elegant, black-colored brocade robe, slowly walked towards Su Luo. Finally, his tall body stopped in front of Su Luo. A devilish radiance started to float to the surface of his beautiful pair of eyes. With a dazzlingly beautiful and devilishly charming manner, he unmovingly stared at Su Luo. From the beginning, the corner of his mouth had a wicked smile, looking until you are struck dumb. You like the king this much? Su Luo suddenly returned to her senses and irritatedly rolled her eyes. What rubbish are you saying? Who likes you? Would this guy die if he didn't make fun of her? Every time, it was the same trick. Nangong Liuyan smiled shallowly, his gaze cast a look at the book in her hand, elementary apothecary book. That's right, our family's Luo girl indeed has the figure of a gifted apothecary. Not cultivating it would be a pity. Speaking of this, Su Luo's heart suddenly moved, she quietly stared at Nangong Liuyan, then with a clear and cold voice, said, "What's the matter with you last night? Old illness. Is it very serious?" Nangong Liuyan's long arm, in one move, encircled Su Luo to his chest. He lowered his head and smilingly looked at her. Is this king's little Luo concerned? Am I right? Su Luo turned her face away and muttered, "Who's concerned? It was only because previously, I didn't know and was suddenly scared by your illness. Why don't you tell me what's it all about in the end? Aren't you Prince Jean? Couldn't you find an apothecary to treat you?" Nangong Liuyan's lips were pursed while he smilingly looked at Su Luo. Strands of bright and beautiful sunlight landed on his bright eyes, like the light and shadows now flowing smoothly. It was resplendent and gorgeous. "Speak, what are you looking at?" Su Luo annoyedly pushed at his strong-as-iron body. Chapter 276, Elementary Apothecary, 1, Nangong Liuyan smiled until sound came out, "Hard-mouthed girl, still saying you don't care about this king. Look at you being so anxious, you just said a bunch of words, and normally, when this king wants to talk to you, it's difficult." Su Luo also realized that she was actually anxious on his behalf. A blush from shame flashed across her face. She feigned calmness and slanted her head away, pretending as if she hadn't heard a thing. Nangong Liuyan loved this kind of bashfulness of hers to death. His expression was like the cherry blossoms in March, splendid and bright, as he deeply and charmingly looked at her. The corner of his mouth contained a light smiling expression. His Luo girl was just this stubborn and cute, truly, he liked her more and more. Both figures were nestled up against each other, standing quietly, and time seemed to have stood still. Time was good and still, life was peaceful. This kind of ambiguous scene, it appeared as if between them, there was really some kind of relationship. A frenetic feeling flashed through Su Luo's heart, she unconsciously pushed away Nangong Luyun. Her gaze landed on the elementary apothecary book on the ground. Her eyes moved slightly and decided to divert Nangong Luyun's attention. Nangong Luyun, your illness really can't be treated? Su Luo softly asked. Nangong Luyun looked at her deeply and charmingly, understatedly saying, it's not something that can't be treated, only these charlatans are too useless. My family's little Luo Luo, on the other hand, is determined to treat the old illness of this king's. Stop rambling on incoherently, what level of apothecary is needed to cure you? Su Luo knew he usually wasn't serious, even when talking about an old illness. He was still smiling like before, light as a cloud and gentle as wind. This, should be at least a grandmaster's level. Nangong Luyun said somewhat uncertainly. Grandmaster level. Su Luo suddenly had a feeling of looking up at a high mountain. It was important to know that apothecary levels were divided into elementary apothecary, intermediate apothecary, advanced apothecary, elite apothecary, master apothecary, and then after, was finally grandmaster apothecary, 1. Apothecary levels were very strict, every promotion to the next grade was extremely difficult. Now, she still hadn't even felt her way to the doorway of an apothecary. Wanting her to rise to the grandmaster level apothecary, oh heavens, in contrast being hacked by lightning seemed simpler. Nangong Luyun also clearly didn't seem to place his hope on Su Luo's body. However, he merely wrapped himself around her and resolutely handed over the responsibility to her. Yes, Grandmaster Apothecary, this king's Luo girl must strive very hard. You must strive to cure this king's illness earlier. Speaking of which, every month, it flares up once to torture me. This king is quite impatient. Su Luo was simply speechless. It's better that your hope is not placed on me. The me in this lifetime might not be able to reach that height. You must know, on this entire continent, during that time, there was only Elder Zihua who was promoted to the Grandmaster level of apothecary. Even though she obtained this renowned elder's legacy, yet how far she could walk on this path, she really didn't know. That won't do, you must cure this king. Nangong Luyun nevertheless pig-headedly insisted on relying on Su Luo no matter what. Besides you, this king will not allow anyone else to treat it. I will just wait for you. Luo girl, for the purpose of curing this king, you must try very hard to raise your level as an apothecary. How could there be this kind of headstrong person, though granted, even if he was picky about the doctor when seeking medical help, it was okay. But he had actually picked her who was now still a zero-level damn rookie. He really, indeed, did add a huge pressure on her. You are not allowed to be this unruly. Su Luo unhappily glared at him. This man, in front of others, was powerful and unparalleled. However, in front of her, he was like an unruly child that made trouble without reason, making her feel even more speechless. Nangong Luyun's red lips were grumbling. His bright and intelligent, large eyes pitifully and accusingly watched her. Su Luo was simply about to be defeated by Nangong Luyun being like this. Chapter 277, Elementary Apothecary, 2, okay. I promise you I will study hard to be an apothecary. However, you should also promise me, if in the future you come across a Grandmaster Apothecary, you are not allowed to refuse treatment from them. Su Luo had no choice but to agree to his demand. Nangong Luyun wickedly and unscrupulously blinked his eyes, mumbling a sentence to himself. If this king was to walk in a roundabout route, then how could I run into one? What did you say? His voice was very soft, Su Luo couldn't hear it clearly. Luo Luo's thoughts are for the sake of this king. This king's heart is very comforted. You should rest assured that this king will certainly marry you and take you as wife. I will save the position of main wife, Princess Jean, for you. Nangong Luyun said in high spirits. Once he said this, Su Luo at once recalled the manor servant's actions earlier today. If it weren't for the evildoer in front of her secretly issuing commands, then how could those servants dare to address her with that title? The position of Princess Jean, humph, you should keep it, this young lady is not interested. But this king wants only you to take that position. Nangong Liuyun's eyes showed dense tender feelings. He grabbed hold of and pulled Su Luo, who was turning and just about to leave, to a stop. His face that charmed all living things, had an unprecedentedly serious, earnest stare. The position of Princess Jean, apart from you, will eternally not be filled by another person. Then, what about the Jade Lake's Fairy? This sentence was almost blurted out by Su Luo. However, in the end, she stiffly restrained herself. The Jade Lake's Fairy, this was an eternal taboo between them that would not let her be at peace and even-tempered. Often, when she was touched by his dedication to her, that incomparably beautiful face would always emerge in her head. That extraordinary and refined fairy who was above the common populace. This was a thorn in her heart. It normally didn't hurt nor itch until at a critical time, then it would make the heart sore. Su Luo quietly and unmovingly gazed at Nangong Luyun. Finally, she turned her head away. That name, she never wanted to say it again. If one day in the future, she didn't need to say it and Nangong Luyun would automatically stand by her side defending her, protecting her, in that case, maybe she really would give her heart to him and together with him, build the river of love. Together in this different world, hand in hand, they would conquer a slice of bright heaven for themselves. Now, she must not give him any promises, because she was afraid of being hurt again. In her previous life, being stupid once was enough. In this world, she must live for herself and to live marvelously well. Nangong Luyun was very intelligent. How could he not understand what Su Luo wanted to say, but once again didn't say? However, the him right now could not say anything. He silently looked out the window, slowly releasing a deep breath. An understanding but lonely smile flashed on Su Luo's face. The atmosphere inside the room was now somewhat heavy and dense. Nangong Luyun suddenly let out a sigh and heavily rubbed Su Luo's head. Doesn't Luo girl want to practice to become an apothecary? Come, this king will take you for a stroll around the medicine garden. If there are medicinal herbs that you need, we will pick it from there. Medicine garden. Su Luo curiously looked at him. You actually have a medicine garden? Nangong Luyun noncommittally smiled with a should-be-expected manner as he led Su Luo by hand and walked out. Along the way, they came across the manor's servants. Each and every one of them had seen His Highness Prince Jean from a distance away, so they had already moved to the curbside, bowing while waiting. Yesterday, those that had waited upon them in the dining room were merely a small number of people. As a result, today they actually saw with their own eyes their family's azure-like, deeply cold highness unexpectedly acting like a child. He was in an exuberant mood while leading along a young lady, holding her hand. For a moment, there were people dropping plates, walking and twisting their ankles, spraining their necks, and the greatest number of people were the ones whose chins dropped to the ground. Su Luo was somewhat embarrassed, and she wanted to shake off Nangong Luyun. However, Nangong Luyun's hand, which seemed as if it was lightly holding hers, his wrist was in fact as hard as an iron clamp. No matter what Su Luo did, she was unable to throw him off. Chapter 278, Elementary Apothecary, 3, Nangong Luyun acted as if nobody else was present, ignoring all kinds of people. In high spirits, he led Su Luo along, and on the way, showed her off as he passed. Su Luo plaintively complained in her heart, she was done for. If this was to spread out, did she still have a reputation to keep? Prince Jin's royal manor was very large, the courtyards were arranged irregularly, resulting in a charming effect. Didn't know how long they walked for. Eventually, Nangong Luyun brought Su Luo to a garden that was overflowing with the aroma of medicinal herbs. When Su Luo went inside this medicine garden and saw the scenery in front of her, it immediately made her eyes shine brightly. Su Luo identified everything one by one and found that the medicinal herbs in this medicine garden was complete. All the medicinal herbs mentioned in that elementary apothecary book were practically all here. In this case, it was easier to manage. It also helped her avoid going everywhere to search for these medicinal herbs. However, for her first time refining medicine, what kind of medicinal pill would be good to refine? Su Luo's fingers was on her chin in a pondering position, her brain was rapidly thinking about this question. After thinking for a while, Su Luo finally decided to refine an elementary level spirit restoration pill. Spirit restoration pill, as the name implied, was a pill that replenished a person's spirit power. A person's spirit power was limited, after a battle, it would be used up. However, if a person swallowed a spirit restoration pill on the spot, then it was possible to restore their spirit power. Elementary spirit restoration pills could only restore a person's spirit strength by 10%. Intermediate spirit restoration pills could restore a person's spirit strength by 20%, and so on. However, on this continent, there were very few apothecaries, moreover, the success rate for refining spirit restoration pills was not very high. Therefore, the market price for elementary spirit restoration pill was still not very low. The common market price for one pill was 100 gold coins. Because Su Luo's body contained the wood element system, she naturally had a familiar feeling with regards to medicinal herbs. She closed her eyes and was able to clearly feel the distinction between the similar types of medicinal herbs. Which stalk of herb was most active and strong, and which stalk of herb was withered and listless. Su Luo, without the slightest hesitation, naturally picked all the vital and active herbal ingredients. In the medical garden, she harvested more than 10 types of herbal ingredients, which she needed to refine the spirit restoration pill. Su Luo threw all of the herbal ingredients into her space at once. Nangong Luyun had already guessed that Su Luo was able to unlock her space. Now seeing this, as expected, she really did unlock it. Since she was able to use her space in front of him, it was sufficient to prove her trust in him. Thinking up to here, a smiling expression appeared at the corner of Nangong Luyun's mouth. Luo girl, you couldn't have also already prepared the medicinal cauldron? Of course, and also, to tell you the truth, my medicinal cauldron is difficult to purchase with even 10,000 gold coins. You absolutely cannot imagine how great it is. Su Luo, with a lofty and strutting manner, cast him a glance. Her medicinal cauldron was called Zihua Medicinal Cauldron, which was actually the one used by Elder Zihua back then. The success rate for refining pills was fully doubled. This was not something that those other medicinal cauldrons outside could compare to. Then this king will look forward to it, however, for the first time refining pills, it is hard to avoid failure. If so, then Luo girl must not cry and snivel. Nangong Luyun spoilingly and indulgently looked at her. As long as she was happy, no matter what she was doing, he would keep her company in the same place. He was merely afraid that she would be disappointed when she failed, therefore Nangong Luyun warned her in advance. Cry and snivel. What kind of person did he take her for? Su Luo exasperatedly rolled her eyes at him. She will make him open his eyes wide to have a good look. She, Su Luo, not only could cultivate martial arts at an astonishing speed, but also in the way of refining, she absolutely would not lose to others. After she chased Nangong Luyun out, Su Luo closed the door and her spirit entered her space in a flash. Su Luo did it step by step according to the procedure in elementary apothecary book. First of all, step 1 required that the more than 10 types of medicinal herbs be soaked in spring water. Su Luo, in her space, also did not need to collect other types of water. What she had the most of in her space was celestial spirit water. Also, the celestial spirit water's usefulness had already passed one person and one divine dragon's verification. It was absolutely great. Su Luo retrieved some celestial spirit water and soaked the medicinal herbs one by one. Chapter 279, Elementary Apothecary. 4. She didn't know that precisely because of this lazy action, this gave her an unexpected result. Moreover, this brought about a huge impact to her future refining career. In the process of soaking the medicinal herbs, Su Luo, with interest, sized up the Zihua medicinal cauldron in front of her. The Zihua medicinal cauldron was a full half a meter high. The whole cauldron appeared to be reddish-purple in color. On the medicinal cauldron were carved 4 dragon heads with their mouths wide open. The dragon heads seemed malevolent with mouths wide open, as if the flames that reached the sky were gushing out of the dragon's mouth. The 4 dragon tails were coiled together, taking the shape of an unusual-looking cauldron lid. Lifting open the cauldron lid, it was a wash-basin-sized, first-rate iron pot. This was where the medicinal herbs were to be placed, and on top of the iron pot, was a piece of smooth, flat divider where the medicinal pills would appear on top of it. The Zihua medicinal cauldron could not only amplify the flame, but would also double the success rate during the refining process, because of the rare metals mixed in when creating the cauldron. Su Luo placed the pre-soaked medicinal herbs one by one into the iron pot, and used the copper lid to cover the cauldron tightly. She lightly patted the mechanism underneath the cauldron. A flame. Su Luo was indeed a fire system mage. Moreover, she could already condense out a small ball of flame by now. However, she always felt that she lacked a little something. Su Luo's round eyes cleverly turned around as she pondered. All of a sudden, Su Luo clapped her hands. She finally remembered. Got it. How could she have forgotten that treasure? The little divine dragon, ah. The true fire he sprayed out of his mouth was much stronger compared to her own small ball of fire. The strength of his fire was stronger than hers by innumerable fold. Su Luo fished up the little divine dragon that was lying on his back on top of the source stone, with his little belly rising and falling in the midst of a deep sleep. The little divine dragon moved his little mouth and rubbed against Su Luo's chest. Both of his little paws were tightly clenching her lapel, and he once again sunk into deep slumber. He also let out a little snore. Su Luo suddenly didn't know whether to laugh or cry. However, because it was important to her cultivation, she nevertheless had to borrow a little bit of the little divine dragon's flame. Su Luo pinched the little divine dragon's nose. For a short while it was tolerable, but after a period of several breaths, the little divine dragon started to slowly wake up. His sleepy eyes were drowsy, looking at Su Luo with a bewildered and innocent expression. Be good, don't sleep yet. First, spray out a little fire for your master. Su Luo held the little divine dragon and aimed his little mouth at one of the open dragon mouths on top of the medicinal cauldron's lid. Su Luo impatiently wanted the little divine dragon to assist with the source of the fire, but wasn't aware that now, the posture of her holding 2 of the little divine dragon's legs looked like she was holding a peeing little kid. Fortunately, when the little divine dragon saw the carved large dragon design on top, his sleepy and drowsy eyes become mostly awake. In fact, Su Luo was still a little worried, because the little divine dragon, this child, in the recent past, was a card that would come out and do things outside of expectations. Recalling before, in order to eliminate that pursuer following her, she took the risk and let him undertake the task. The result was that he first sprayed out water, which almost led to a huge accident. Fortunately, the second time, he accidentally sprayed out lightning, that directly roasted the guy chasing her to kill her into charcoal. Su Luo warned him over and over again, remember, you must spray out fire. Don't spray out water nor lightning. By all means, you must not spray out water. If water was to go in, then this whole thing would be ruined. Maybe it was because the gods were standing on Su Luo's side, her luck could be considered good. What the muddle-headed little divine dragon sprayed out was fire, genuine fire. After borrowing the fire source, Su Luo allowed the little divine dragon to lie down and continue sleeping. She started to refine the pill. The true fire in Su Luo's palm, under her control, entered the wide-open dragon mouth. The temperature at the top of the medicinal cauldron gradually rose little by little. The more time passed, the more focused Su Luo's powerful mind became. This was the first time she refined a pill. Moreover, the pill being refined was also not a high-level one. However, she inevitably would have a kind of obsessive feeling. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.